recognize another member of the National Stakeholders Working Group, that's the board of Neiti. He's the president of the Nigerian Mining and Geoscience Society, Alabo Charles David Charles. Alabo Charles, we're glad to have you in our midst this morning. We'll move on now so that we gain on time and take a number of goodwill messages. Happily, the persons who have been penciled down for goodwill messages don't deliver lectures when they are invited to deliver goodwill messages. It's a major challenge that I face when you ask for a goodwill message, you delimit the time, say 2 minutes, which is 120 seconds, or 3 minutes, which is 180 seconds. And then the goodwill message goes on and on and on. Once at the International Conference Center, I had to appreciate a gentleman who was invited to give a goodwill message, a top-ranking government official. And I said, thank you very much for the keynote address. So this morning, those who've been penciling down, I know them, are fairly familiar with their style. They'll go straight to the essence of the goodwill message. And the first that I will be inviting will be the group CEO of NNPC Limited, here represented by the Chief Finance Officer, Alhaji Umar Jia.
Still good morning. Mr. Chairman, members of the board of Neiti, stakeholders, panelists, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you all. As you have heard, we have an important occasion today in Bauchi/Gombe states at the Kolmani event, where Mr. President will now formally kickstart drilling operations, having found substantial oil and gas in commercial quantities. And so the GCO is there and has asked me to convey his goodwill message at this occasion. And I therefore read his goodwill message to yourselves. As you are aware, His Excellency, the President, signed the PIA into law on 16th August 2021. Subsequently, a PIA steering committee chaired by the Honorable Minister of State Petroleum Resources, with membership cutting across various ministries and agencies, was inaugurated. Neiti, led by the Executive Secretary, was part of this committee, whose task was to coordinate and oversee the implementation of this landmark act. The passage of the Petroleum Industry Act is a dawn of a new era in the oil and gas industry. In NNPC, we are excited about the opportunities that the PIA brings to our business. We believe that adequate implementation of the act will stimulate the growth of the country's oil and gas sector. We are therefore committed to assuming the new roles and targets for NNPC Limited as determined by the PIA. The PIA in itself is built on the principles of competitiveness, fair and equitable sharing of risks and reward, a revenue split between government and investors, simplicity of administration, and transparency. It is hoped that as stakeholders implement the PIA, these principles are abided by because they have the potential to propel Nigeria into accelerated economic growth through the increased monetization of our crude oil and increased production of gas for energy and industrialization. Our realization that Nigeria truly needs a diligently implemented PIA led to the setup of our own in-house PIA committee. With the support of the National Steering Committee, and renowned consultants, our PIA committee has been able to design a governance, a commercially focused organizational design, a renewed our governance processes and structure, secured devaluation and migration of all our assets to NNPC Limited, designed best-in-class policies, processes, and procedures, designed policies for the management of Federation assets, designed a framework for managing host communities, and strengthened our compliance, risk management, and ethics function to entrench transparency and accountability in our systems in line with our commitments to Neiti and EITI. I'm pleased to report that some of the projected benefits of the PIA have already begun to manifest in NNPC Limited, particularly in the areas of corporate governance, operational efficiency, and business growth. It is therefore our solemn resolve to ensure total implementation of the PIA in order to unlock its underlying potentials for the benefit of all Nigerians. In doing so, we will require the collaboration and support of key stakeholders. I believe that in this regard, we can always count on Neiti. Once again, I thank you for this opportunity and wish us a successful conference. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Group CEO of NNPC Limited, represented by the Chief Finance Officer, Alhaji Umar Ajia. The next goodwill message will be coming from the Commission, that is the Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission. And there's a Deputy Director in our midst, Mr. Okoro Okechukwu. Please come forward quickly for the next goodwill message.
The chairman of the board of Neiti, the board members, the executive secretary of Neiti, the pressman, and the students, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor to deliver this good message on behalf of the NUPRC Chief Executive Officer, Engineer Gbenga Komolafe, who is unavoidably absent because of other state functions. I would first like to congratulate the Executive Secretary of Neiti and his team for organizing this stakeholders engagement forum on implementation of the PIA Act 2021. The idea of organizing this stakeholders engagement on PIA implementation is apt and germane to the current efforts to strengthen the petroleum industry in Nigeria. Nigeria started commercial oil production in 1958 with little or no detailed legislation as legal framework. At the early years, the petroleum laws were the mining laws and other pieces of law just to keep going. In 1969, the first petroleum laws were promulgated as the Petroleum Act of 1969 with its later amendments. The industry also depends on regulations and guidelines to ensure that exploration and production companies work with the best practices in the industry. There was therefore the need for a comprehensive legislation that will address the observed lapses with the aim of improving the industry and also attract more investors to the country. The issue of environmental protection and the rights of the people whose land was also taken was also important to be catered for. In furtherance of the above, the PIA was then mooted and after many years had become a reality. The PIA is envisaged to address all the observed lapses of 1969 legislation. The NUPRC, as we all know, is also a creation of the Act as the upstream regulator. We are ready to ensure that the law succeeds. Let me use this opportunity to urge the stakeholders here present to contribute the ideas that will enable the nation to derive the best from the Act. The AUPRC is ready and willing to work with Neiti and other stakeholders to achieve the full implementation of the PIA 2021. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, I am fully convinced that this engagement will be highly successful based on the caliber of participants here gathered. Thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Okoro Okechukwu, Deputy Director from the Commission, speaking on behalf of his boss at the Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission. We also have on the agenda a goodwill message from the authority, that's the Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. I earlier recognized Ebuka Onyechi. If he or she is still around and you have a goodwill message, kindly step forward. All right, so permit me at this time to invite the Africa team lead for OPM, Oxford Policy Management, Mr. Ken Ene, to step forward and give his goodwill message. Thank you.
The chairman, the board of Neiti, the executive secretary of Neiti, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, please permit me to stand on existing protocol. Like our erudite facilitator said, I'll try and make this as brief as possible, unless you're giving me the permission to do a keynote address. I think the ES of Neiti said something very interesting. He said that so many names have changed, and I just want to take up that point. So I work for Oxford Policy Management. In fairness, Oxford Policy Management has been in existence since 1979. The name has remained consistent. However, we have implemented a lot of projects where the names change. So one of the projects that is well known in the industry is the Facility for Oil Sector Transformation, which ran for over 10 years, supporting various stakeholders across the value chain. FOSTA actually ended in March last year, and our very generous sponsors, the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, which is the UK government, provided some very limited resources for us to do a little extension project, which is what we call FOSTA ICF. ICF means International Climate Finance. So our focus was looking at the reduction of emissions from the oil and gas sector, and it was very targeted at certain issues. That small project is ending in January this year. So when the ES, as everyone knows, the ES is a very persuasive gentleman. When he spoke to us and said, there's also a need for us to engage stakeholders, the PIA, everyone has described how transformational the PIA is. And I really love what Kingsley said. It's a journey, not the destination. And that journey is so important because the implementation requires so many regulations, so much refinement. But for us, crucially, it requires stakeholder participation. And the petroleum industry is so diverse. You have the industry, you have those that are impacted by that industry. I mean, I'll give the example of anytime you go out and you see a petrol queue, your heart starts beating and you're like, do I have enough petrol in my car? So that is just even at the very micro level. You look at the sort of macro level, the fiscals, the host communities, the administration. So these are very crucial issues. So for us, we're really excited. Neiti has been a premier partner for us over the years. So we're really excited to partner with Neiti. We are also encouraging everyone here present to please see this as your event, because a lot of the key agencies here also need inputs and your feedback. I'll give you an example. In the recent times, we supported the Petroleum Regulatory Commission around the review of the 2018 gas flare regulations. And it shows that even government agencies, with all the resources they have, at times they want to bring in external experts to provide some input into that process. So we see all of you here as valuable parts of that process. So on that note, I want to say thank you so much for coming, and we really look forward to an excellent deliberation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ken Ene, the Africa team lead for Oxford Policy Management. I'm sure some of us were not in the hall at the time the executive secretary indicated that Neiti was quite excited by the contribution of Oxford Policy Management to the hosting of today's event. And if you were here and you are still here, the applause for Mr. Ken Ene sounded too sparse, and therefore, thank you very much. You can see he even stood up now to soak it in, to say that yes, the stakeholders are fully appreciative now of OPM. Thank you very much one more time, Mr. Ken. And the next, we have two more goodwill messages to take. We take one from the chairman of the Communications and Civil Society Steering Committee of the National Stakeholders Working Group, Mr. Peter Egbule. And thereafter, we'll introduce the last big man for the goodwill message.
The chairman, Neiti NSWG, the executive secretary of Neiti, members of the Neiti NSWG, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, you're all welcome. For me, it's always an emotional thing to talk about PIA, not just because of how long it took us to eventually pass it into law, but the invaluable sacrifices the stakeholders made to get us to this stage. Today, we are discussing its implementation. I want to say congratulations to all of us. The civil society is especially delighted that all relevant stakeholders are vigorously collaborating to ensure a successful implementation of the Act. Again, I want to say thank you. We also wish to express our desire that this level of stakeholders' committed engagement is sustained. We therefore pray that the extractive industry in Nigeria will witness a strong positive rebirth within the global extractive industry to the benefit of Nigerians. God bless you all. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Peter Egbule, for the. Somebody has his phone on. Is that a ringtone or what? Is it you have all kinds of funny ringtones, and you'll be struggling sometimes to ascertain where it is coming from. Let me just advise, if you are coming to the platform, the temporary steps you have here did not, the risers and the steps are not, I don't know how they configure them. You're supposed to have it at least about 10 inches to 12 inches, which is a foot. So you have to turn sideways so that you don't lose or miss a step. That's some caution in any event, so that that's fine for us. But we will take, I earlier said we are going to have 2 goodwill messages, but I've just been advised, and I've seen her, the chief executive of the authority, midstream and downstream regulatory authority, is here represented by an executive director, Dr. Mrs. Zainab Gobri. Dr. Mrs. Zainab Gobri will also give us a goodwill message. You could do it from your location. I think that's a lot easier, so that we don't waste time. And thereafter, I will invite the last goodwill message. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. I'd like to stay on existing protocols. I see a lot of my bosses here, actually, people that molded me to what I am seated. Mr. Ogujamilusi, to be specific. Good morning to you. Please forgive me while I'm here. The podium is not safe and I just had surgery. So I'll be very grateful if you allow me to remain seated for the goodwill message. At the NMDPRA, our ace is someone that if you call him at 1 a.m., he's up and he'll answer your call. And for a regulator, that is a culture he's passed to all the executive directors and the staff members. With that being said, the ace would like to congratulate you on this event and assure you of our collaboration and anything we can do to foster Nigeria to move to the next level. The authority is here to do so. You have our full support. I'm not going to say much, and let's enjoy the session together.
Thank you very much, Executive Director of the Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority. Let me do 2 things. One, to formally recognize in our midst, and then to also invite him to come forward and give us what will be the last goodwill messages in the series that we are having this morning. It's the chairman of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission. And as you very well know, this is one of the very critical commissions in our financial space, public sector financial space. The lawyer, he was acting for quite a while, but now he's substantive chair. And sometimes I get confused when I see FRCN. I don't know where that is coming from. Sometimes they try to use that FRCN. And the gentleman who is sitting to your right was a staff of FRCN for many years. I'm talking about the executive secretary of Neiti. He was, of course, State House correspondent, and FRCN, as we know, stands for Federal Radio Corporation of Nigeria. So when I see the name, Victor Murako, FRCN, I'm wondering whether he has also become a broadcaster. But certainly he remains chair of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission. Please, let's welcome him to deliver his goodwill message.
The chairman, Neiti board, the executive secretary, chairman, please allow me to stand on the already established protocol. I bring you and all participants here goodwill from Fiscal Responsibility Commission. I want to thank particularly the Neiti executive secretary and the partner in this stakeholders engagement, Oxford Policy Management, for putting their heads together, for deeming it necessary to have this stakeholders engagement. It is very critical that meetings such as this, and I expect more of it, because PIA, just like some people still call it PIB because it was on, the efforts to get it done was on for a very long time. It's such an act, it's a law, it's a piece of law that Nigerians have so much yearned for. So we want to congratulate all those that played role in ensuring the enactment of this Petroleum Industry Act. For us at Fiscal Responsibility Commission, this is one piece of law that is very critical in what we are doing to ensure that we have macroeconomic stability, because it will indeed turn around both the national, the state, and even the rural communities. It's very clear that Section 2 of PIA clearly stated some of the objectives, some of the key objectives which is supposed to achieve. At Fiscal Responsibility Commission, our mandate is also linked up with transparency and accountability, ensuring good governance, all the reforms that is required to bring about better management of our resources. Well, for us, this is a very beautiful law, excepting that it deliberately ousted the rules of Fiscal Responsibility Commission, Fiscal Responsibility Act, and also the Public Procurement Act, for whatever reasons. And even more, we believe that it's all about governance and improvement of transparency. But I'm not afraid, because I trust the ability of Neiti, particularly with the vision of what the team led by the present, yes, my brother Obonaya Oji is doing. We are trusting that he'll be able to fill in a lot of gaps, because ordinarily at Fiscal Responsibility Commission, we are at sea. Why such a beautiful law that would have meant for greater transparency should ask the Fiscal Responsibility Act and Public Procurement Act, which are even the the aspect that has to do with remittances to the fund being operated by the Accountant General. For us, it's a step forward. I know there can be improvement on it. We want to associate with this. We believe that there'll be a lot of dialogue as we move on, and we believe that stakeholders' engagement such as this will indeed bring a better management of the oil revenues and the oil sector. We want to associate ourselves and say congratulations to Neiti for this bold step, and we want to thank Oxford Policy Management for making this possible. And we look forward to a better management of our resources. Thank you.
Thank you very much, the chairman of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission, for that goodwill message, and also for the message to the implementation committee of the PIA. Just before the next item on the agenda, let me very quickly recognize some of the management staff of Neiti who are here in the audience. Dr. Dita Basi, Director of Technical Services, is right here in our midst. Saad Balarabi, Head Resource Disbursement. Obiageli Onwara, Head Communications and Stakeholders Management. She's been busy running around to ensure that this event is a success. We also have Jane Omumere, Head Legal. Usman Abdulrahman, Head Internal Audit, and Mr. Godwin Okpene. In addition, of course, to a number of other management staff who are in the hall. From the agenda, you would see that the special address on the status report on the PIA implementation was to be delivered by the Honorable Minister of State Petroleum Resources, His Excellency Timothy Silva. But just to reiterate that this is a big day, 22nd day of November in the year 2022. And Timothy Silva, of course, is there in the Bauchi Gombe Basin with the President of the Federal Republic, who also doubles as the Honorable Minister of Petroleum Resources, for the formal flag off of oil drilling in that basin. So understandably, he is not in our midst this morning. But we have Mr. Lawan Musa. Lawan Musa is the Group General Manager in the office of the Group CEO of NNPC Limited. And Lawa Musa is the team lead and PIA of the team lead of the PIA Planning and Coordination Group. As you very well know, to a large extent, NNPC is at the heart of implementation. There are a number of other bodies that are there, but the team lead of the PIA Planning and Coordination Group, Lawan Musa, who is a Group General Manager in NNPC Limited, will now give us a status update on the PIA implementation. Mr. Musa, please.
A very good morning, the Executive Secretary, the Neiti Board, and the distinguished audience. Please permit me to stand on the existing protocol. As has been said, today marks one of the biggest events in Nigeria that demonstrates the importance of the implementation of the PIA. And I want to congratulate Neiti. For us to be here today, it clearly demonstrates probably we'll be counting a number. But today we're discussing PIA implementation, which it means it's not just a piece of document, 319 sections, 5 chapters, 8 schedules. Already implementation is ongoing. So it means it's not just a piece of document. It's actually a transformational policy direction of the government as relates to the petroleum industry. In the first instance, I think it would be good to reflect the benefits of why the PIA is what it is today. The world is changing. The landscape is completely different from what we used to know 20 years back. The climate is on the other side. The comparative benefits of oil and the other resources is also on the table. And until we are able to realize the benefits of what today we have as a country and as a continent, we may not be able to really catch up from a developmental standpoint. So PIA is an industry bill converted into an act that is only for the petroleum industry, but the intention is not for the industry. The actual intention is to transform the Nigerian economy and overall has an impact on the continent and the global scale. Today, we do not have enough electricity. Nigeria cannot develop without electricity. But if you are to ask today, what is the statistics of hydro generation to other contributions into the grid, you realize that gas is actually the driver of power in Nigeria today. So you can't have a Nigerian economy. So therefore you need power, and the quickest access to power today is if you have gas. The gas to power is your market, is your entry. And one of the cardinal focus of this act was actually to drive gas development, gas to the industries, gas to power, so that you create jobs. And when you create jobs, then you'll be able to take quite a number out of poverty. Once people have disposable income, it will directly impact on the overall economic value chain. People have the power to buy. Once the purchasing power goes up, you need not to invite anybody from any other continent to come and invest in terms of industrial growth. So it means it's a linkage. You are creating the entire value chain that will transform the overall economy into what we will really be confident of as a nation, that we have been able to transform ourselves into the global scale. So standing here today, all of us gathered here today are not meant to just share the successes or some of the imports of what have been done in terms of the PIA implementation, but rather to re-echo the efforts and the contributions of each and every one of us and the entire economy to make sure PIA is a success. The success of PIA means success to health sector, because through that you will have NAFTA that will go into the petchem. It means success to the agriculture, because you have fertilizer that will also now transform your agricultural sector. PIA success means success to the power, which directly links to the manufacturing and the industrial growth. It will also means a better education, because through that you will have the revenues that will flow into the government through the royalties, through taxes that will support the overall economic growth of the country. On this note, I would like to start with the perspective around what are the key successes of this implementation. Definitely, there are quite a number of challenges. So the piece of the document came into effect August. It will have still remain as a document today, if not that steps, very critical and strategic, were taken first by Mr. President through inauguration of a PIA implementation committee that comprises erudite, highly respected, and highly committed patriotic Nigerians to be part of that committee. I'm proud that the ES Neiti is one of them. The group CEO, NNPC, is one of them. The Honorable Minister of State Petroleum Resources is the one leading the team. You have representation from the Prime Minister of Justice, Prime Ministry of Finance, Prime Minister of Petroleum Resources, including the institutions also that will be transformed, including the group CEO, NNPC, the ACE, the Chief CEO of the Commission, and also an independent advisor, a seasoned lawyer, to provide those legal supports to make sure that the PIA is a success. And since then, the PIA STEACO had provided excellent leadership to make sure that this is a success. I'm not flattering them, but I believe Nigerians need to know the painstaking of taking something from nowhere to something is a great thing. Today, just the same way the piece of legislation was structured, you have the governance section, you have the administration section, and you have the fiscal implementations and the rest. And the governance, all the three key institutions that are supposed to be created have been created. Today they are alive, already manned, and already executing. And I believe this is a major, major milestone for you to transform the DPR, the defunct DPR, into the commission, to size part of the downstream of the DPR now moves into the authority. Already also the authority is already active, and transformation of NNPC from a corporation to NNPC Limited. So these three institutions today, they no longer have recourse to what was the defunct DPR or the PRA or the Petroleum Equalization Fund or the defunct NNPC Corporation. Today, we are talking CEO upstream. We're talking about CEO authority, CEO NNPC Limited. Nobody could have imagined that this could be really as seamless as it had been without the clear direction and of the STEACO. Now, the STEACO did not stop at that, also had an implementation working group. Those implementation working groups provided the working level teams to ensure this implementation is a success. Our 4 working groups includes the fiscal that deals with the regulations, because any piece of law will require clear guidance as to how this law will be implemented. And the only way it can be done, if you have a clear regulation that guides the implementation of the law. And I'm very, very pleased to update you that as regards to the regulations, most of the priority regulations, they were designed by the law. And interestingly, the law itself envisaged ease of administration. A number were timed in the law that certain actions must be taken by so date so that it forces the implementation of the law. So therefore, we are very, very happy to announce that, for example, in the upstream regulatory space, already we have 17 out of 26 priority regulations already drafted at various stages of gazetting or drafting or reviewing or having a stakeholder engagement. And just like we are having this stakeholder engagement, I want to also commend the drafting team of the PIA for envisaging that for the first time, design of the law. In the upstream space, for example, the royalty regulations have been done. Fees and rent regulations have already been done. This the critical, because we have some brownfields has also been done. The environmental remediation has also been done. The host com, which is very, very critical, until you have license to operate in the host communities, we will never achieve the kind of success we will want to. So therefore, priority regulations included the host community regulation, and that has also been done, including stakeholder engagement, and has already been gazetted. Host community regulation. We have also now we call at the time when the PIA was drafted, there was also the marginal field round. And we're happy to announce also issued to all the successful 2020 in the midstream space, which is linked as delivery from the upstream part of it is also done, because you need the DOM gas delivery obligation to be able to guarantee the delivery of gas into the midstream space. And one more important thing to really understand with the gas delivery obligation is when we used to have it before, it used to be a gas supply obligation. A gas supply obligation, it simply says the gas is at the wellhead. But today with the PIA, you have a gas delivery obligation. So it's a delivered obligation. And that regulation is also done. You also have the gas player regulation. So you could see, really looking at the scan from an upstream space, all the priority regulations that are critical for an upstream operation have already been done. In terms of the midstream space, that's the midstream and downstream regulatory authority. Also, the midstream and downstream petroleum operation regulation has been done. Of course, some of these regulations that I've also mentioned, especially for the midstream, are currently already published on the website of the two regulators. All the stakeholders can actually visit, and all those engagements have been planned. So for example, if you check, you will find the measurement regulation, which is very critical for our own operation, is also ready. Transportation and shipment regulation is also ready. Pipeline regulation, because petroleum pipeline regulation is also ready. The natural gas pricing is also right. And then decommissioning and abandonment. Because unlike before, we only had, when we discuss decommissioning and abandonment, we're only discussing the upstream decommissioning and abandonment. But with the PIA, decommissioning and abandonment also applies to the midstream assets, including the refineries and the pipelines. And all those must be provided for in line with the provisions of the Act. And those funds must be in an escrow so that you guarantee the decommissioning and abandonment so that the environments will remain healthy. Because to us, we must be seen as an industry, as a partner to the communities. And the only way we can guarantee that is by prudent operations. So therefore, for both the upstream and the midstream, safety regulations have also been done. And in the midstream space, if you look at the law, it provided for the midstream and downstream gas infrastructure fund. And it's supposed to be supporting the drive of the private sector in the midstream space. And the council for that has been already constituted and inaugurated. When you go through and read the law, maybe are not as clear. Maybe there are some realities that need to be accommodated in line with the philosophy of the law had already been taken. So therefore, it is really comforting, and we really like to commend both the STERCO, the IWG, and the institutions for really driving this to this point. Then the second part of this is the administration itself. And getting to the administration already, we have significant improvements and updates as regards to tax. Because one element in terms of the administration is also how do we administer tax? Remember, the PIA allows for only voluntary conversion. So therefore, you can have a situation where some of the upstream licenses will still remain within the Petroleum Act until when the license expires. Or there are some that will convert immediately to the PIA terms. And therefore, for the FIRS side, already circulars have already been developed. Templates for the administration have also been developed, especially around either cost consolidation, the conversion transition, and a number of them, including the hydrocarbon tax template has also been developed. CETA template also has been developed. Now coming back to the commercial part of the implementation. So this is on the regulatory space. You can see both the commission and the authority. Significant improvements, significant milestones have been recorded, both in terms of setting up the institutions, designing the organizational structure, manning that structure, coming up with regulations are already on a steady path. However, we're still not saying it's everything done. It's a progress, and we are really happy with this progress. And together with every stakeholder, we're confident that in no time, we should be able to look back and assess the benefits. This time around, we are measuring implementation. And we should be able to come back and look at how has this new law attracted new investments in the upstream? How has this law created jobs? How has this law created an opportunity to increase the tax net in Nigeria? This is really where we want to look for in the near future, that we should come back here, regroup ourselves, and now begin to assess the numbers. And we're very, very confident that this will happen with the support of everyone who will get there. Coming to the commercial space, the law envisaged a new NMPC that is purely commercial. And everyone can imagine migrating NMPC from a corporation to NMPC Limited, quite a Herculean task. And the law did not stop there. It says within the 6 months, NMPC Limited must be established. However, within 1 month of that, PIA Limited came into effect. And I really want to commend the STEARCO for getting it to this point. Not only that, what were the game changers for NMPC Limited? Clearly is to be a commercially focused entity. NMPC today has been reorganized purely on a commercial standpoint, changing the organizational structure to a commercially focused kind of structure. Entities that ordinarily did not drive value, ordinarily ought not to have been a typical KAMA, have been closed. Entities that should be in a typical KAMA status have been created. So therefore, today, you can look back from a sustainability standpoint to say each of the entities in NMPC today can stand on its feet. This is a major, major milestone. Of course, it takes courage. It takes leadership. We're very, very proud of the leadership of both the NMPC and the board of NMPC Limited, the STEARCO PIA, for really standing firm to get to this point. And what will that do for all of us? First, we could remember the PIA created NMPC Limited as an asset or a company owned by the Federation. It's not owned by the federal government. This is also one major shift. This is in line with our transparency to make sure that everybody is on board. It's just that the shareholding will be by the Murphy and Murphy on behalf of the Federation. So NMPC Limited must operate fully commercial without recourse to public funds. And that is where the exemption from the fiscal responsibility comes in, so that they do not have access budgeting. NMPC must return value to government instead, so that the government will use that to fund its budget. And we're very confident from the structure we have seen today in NMPC. The business model has been developed already in NMPC. Deliver value to its shareholders. So therefore, if we look at where we are coming from today, we can really be confident that the implementation of PIA is a major success. But what are the next steps? Our next steps, definitely continuous engagement with stakeholders, selling the value of the PIA, making sure our partners see the value in the PIA, because the fiscal structure of PIA today is one of the most competitive landscape in the world. We moved from one of the top 10 toughest fiscal economy to the most attractive if you look at the prolific nature of Nigeria. Our royalty in deep water today is 7.5%. If you are producing less than 50, it's even 5%. If you are going to produce gas to the domestic, is if you take gas, technically it's 5%. If you are delivering to the market, it's 2.5%. This is a massive investment opportunity for everyone. The law did not stop there. It also introduced a hybrid attractiveness. For existing assets that already had some costs, you had somewhat lower incentive. But if you are coming in today new, you are coming to invest in either shallow water or onshore, your tax is 20%. We are coming from 85% tax structure to a 20% tax structure. This is a massive, massive investment drive for Nigeria. And already, like I said, the FIRS already had developed the CETA and hydrocarbon tax templates to make sure appropriate implementation of this act. So at this point, I want to really commend the STEERCO. I think I can't stop commending the STEERCO, the institutions, for really taking it this far within the shortest time. But why are they doing this? There is an informed decision. If the world will move out of oil, the net zero is 2050, it means clearly we do not have time. Time is of essence. We must be able to maximize oil so that Nigeria can transit out of oil using oil. But not only that, the PIA made significant focus on the midstream gas, and gas is the future. Gas is a line transition, and how it will enable the overall economy using the PIA. I thank you very much for the opportunity.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Lawan Musa. Please, let's one more time appreciate him for the highly informative insights is provided for us this morning into the implementation of the PIA. I'm sure that at the point of registration for this forum, you got a fact sheet on the PIA. If you had a fact sheet, you will see some information there on pages 2 and 3 regarding the strategy for implementation. But what Lawan Musa has done this morning has been to further populate those headlines that you will see in the fact sheet and tell us what has been going on behind the scenes. Truly heartwarming that in 15 months, we have recorded quite some milestones in the implementation of the PIA. Lawan Musa is the Group General Manager in the Office of the Group CEO of the NNPC, and Musa is also team lead of the PIA Planning Coordination Group. So, Mr. Chairman of the Neiti board, members of the board, very distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we will be rising in the interim for a tea break. But while we are out for the tea break, we shall also be having a group photograph of the members of the board and other dignitaries who are here today. I'll specifically invite the chairman of the Neiti board and members of the board, alongside the chairman of the Fiscal Responsibility Commission and the representatives of the chief executives of the commission and the authority and the FIRS and others who are here. You take the group photograph here, and we'll be rising for 30 minutes. So when we reconvene at 12:45, we shall have the panel discussion, which will be preceded by a presentation, again on the PIA, its imperatives for a viable, competitive, and reformed oil and gas industry. The panelists are already available, and you can be sure that it will be another very interesting session at this stakeholders forum. So on that note, Mr. Chairman, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we rise for a tea break to reconvene at 30 minutes time. And those are earlier named, please. Thank you. I believe that we all at least had a cup of tea or a cup of coffee and some snacks. So we're getting into the presentation. May I have your attention, please? We're getting into the presentation and the panel discussion. And that's on the agenda. For the presentation, which is on PIA, imperatives for a viable, competitive, and reformed oil and gas industry, the paper was originally indicated to be presented by Dr. Nuhu Habib, who is special advisor to the president on natural resources, and also a member of the Presidential Committee on Implementation of PIA. But as we have acknowledged, Dr. Nuhu Habib is also on the team that is at the Bochi Gombe Basin for the historic flag off of drilling in that region. So in this place, we'll have engineer Janice Ayan, who is manager production and fuel monitoring of the Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission. Ms. Engineer Janice Ayan, please. Engineer Janice Ayan, are you here? Just kindly signify by raising your hand, and then you will make the main presentation. May I also welcome to the platform Executive Director of the Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, Dr. Mrs. Zainab Gobri, who is already here. Thank you very much. You'll be one of the panelists. Also on the panel, we are re-inviting Lawan Musa, Group General Manager in the Office of the group CEO as part of the panel conversation. From the FRS, we have Mr. Ogunjamilusi, who is also a member of the board. FRS, please, if he's here. And last but not the least, it's a lawyer, Citizens Advocacy for Social Economic Rights, Frank Tietie. Frank? Mr. Janice Ayon, can I have your attention, please? So, you can speak. Yeah, so that, how long is it going to take me to do that? Yeah. So this is the arrangement. The paper presentation by engineer Janice Ayon will take about 10 minutes. And then each of the other, may I have your attention, please? Each of the other panelists will have about 5 minutes to speak to the respective areas of their competence. And thereafter, we will revert to the audience for comments and questions. And then after taking a slew of questions and comments, we will revert to the panelists for their closing thoughts. And that will do before we move on to Neiti's review of the draft regulations. So we're trying to see how we can accommodate all of this in the next hour so that the presentation takes 10 minutes and the panelists, each of them taking 5 minutes, will be 20 minutes. That will be 30 minutes. Q&A and C comments another 10 minutes, and the closing thoughts, another 10 minutes will be done in just about an hour. So we expect that we can close the gap and finish all of this session by 2 o'clock max. So engineer Janice Ayon, manager, gas production and flare monitoring of the commission.
Good afternoon, everyone. Just permit me to stand on already established protocols. My job is very simple. This is a presentation. All right. Sure. So once again, I say greetings to all of you, the chairman of the board and members of the board. Mine is a very simple job to do. This presentation was initially meant to be presented by, as announced, Dr. Nuhu Habib, who is the Executive Commissioner, Development and Production of the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission. What I'm going to do is actually show why, from the perspective of the Upstream Commission, why is the PIA such an imperative for a competitive regulation, or rather a competitive industry for Nigeria. You notice in the first slide, if you could just go to the first slide, you see that the oil and gas industry has been the engine of the Nigerian economy. Basically, I'm doing an assessment of the petroleum industry in Nigeria, whether it is the agriculture, whether it is wholesale, whether it's telecoms, construction. All of these sectors are dependent on the oil and gas industry. But the issue is that in spite of the huge importance of the industry, If you look at its contribution to the GDP, just paltry rate of about 8%, that tells us a story. It tells us that while it is huge, it hasn't quite impacted on the real economy of the country. And so that is a major lowlight when you look at the oil and gas industry. And that is why the PIA, the passage of the PIA as an act is very key, because the intent of the PIA, among other things, is to trickle down the benefits of the petroleum industry along the entire value chain of the oil and gas, such that the Nigerian economy would feel the impact, move us away from a situation where oil and gas is simply serving as a rent, but moving us to an industrialized economy that is based on using gas as major source of driving the economic industrialization of the nation. So if you see again the next slide, basically the story about the oil and gas industry. Oil was discovered around 1956 in the Oloibri area, presently part of the now Bayelsa state. During that period, there were a lot of awards, a lot of licenses that were granted, but minimal activity was actually achieved. And then in 1990s, we saw a situation where the major international oil companies played a huge role in the sector. And then in the 2000s, we migrated to a situation where the independents, the indigenous players, especially with the coming of the marginal field regime, and all of that incentives, we begin to see indigenous players play huge in the oil and gas industry. So we've had some sort of progressive development, if you like, or involvement in our oil and gas industry. But the PIA 2021 is a huge transformational enactment of an act. Why do we say that? If you see the next slide again, who has the slide? Where is the pointer, please? Or where is the mover of the slide, so I can move myself? I want to go to the next slide. So we see that basically there has been a lot of enactments or laws, over the years that were passed, and they had made some contributions along the line, but we believe that the PIA is actually a new dawn in the evolution of the legislative framework of the Nigerian oil and gas industry. And why do we say that? If you go to the next slide, you notice that the PIA has been mentioned by other speakers. There are 5 chapters: institutional governance, administration, attractive fiscal regimes, and host communities. Now, these are features of the PIA that are intended to actually revolutionize the oil and gas industry. And that is why, if you look at the impact of the creation that results from the PIA, it created a much more transparent institution. I'd like to move to the next slide, please. The next slide. Good. So what you can see here, it's the structure of the PIA. Basically, you have the Minister of Petroleum Resources in charge of policy oversight, and then you have the NNPC Limited focusing on commercial operations, and then you have the regulators. You have the Nigeria Upstream Regulatory Commission, being the both technical and commercial regulator of the upstream sector, and then the Nigerian Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulation, being the regulatory authority for the midstream and downstream sector. Now, what is the import of this? You see that there is a segmentation of the hydrocarbon value chain. In the past, when we had the DPR as the only regulator, DPR regulated the entire value chain. And what that means is that some midstream and downstream lost identity. But with the creation of a midstream and downstream regulator and segmenting the value chain into an upstream segment and a midstream and downstream segment, it gives room for an identity for each of these value chain, thereby giving opportunity for more value creation to be achieved out of our natural resource, which is the hydrocarbon resource. Next slide, please. And so basically that is this is illustrating that the PIA created and segmented the value chain into the midstream and the upstream, thereby giving identity to each of the streams and creating opportunity for value creation in each of those segments. Next slide. So basically, yeah, what you see on the screen is the NUPRC and the NMDA PRA, and that is how the industry is regulated through licenses and leases, permits and approval. All of these geared towards achieving optimization in terms of the oil and gas resources of Nigeria. Next slide, please. Next slide. Now, let's talk about the tax regime. What has the PIA done about the tax regime? You know that prior to the PIA, there is the petroleum profit tax, which the oil companies are expected to pay about 85%. But that is being replaced by a company's income tax, CIT, and the payment there is just about 30%. Although there is an introduction of hydrocarbon tax, which is also 30%, but 15% in case of marginal field. But when you sum up either the 30% of the company income tax and the 30% for hydrocarbon tax, it is just about 60%. In the case of marginal field, it's just about 45%. So you see that this is actually has introduced a reduced tax regime for the industry. And again, there is no hydrocarbon tax for gas development, as in oil. So we can say that the PIA is a gas-centric legislation, is gas-friendly legislation, and no wonder we are in the decade of gas. We have chosen as a country gas as our transition fuel. And so anything to ensure that gas gets the kind of value, the kind of attention, it's very welcome. And that is what is intended to be achieved by the PIA. Of course, there are tax holidays for the midstream and downstream gas projects. And when there is the gas utilization, if the gas project is for utilization in country or domestically, there is even additional 5% tax. There's additional 5-year tax holiday. So which shows that indeed the PIA is geared towards incentivizing development and production of oil and gas resources in order to achieve energy security and access which are dependent on gas. Next slide, please. But this is just to talk about the Upstream Regulatory Commission. We have our rules. One of them is acreage management to optimize government take in terms of collection of royalties, then conserving and sustainable development of the natural resources. Basically, in this era, the oil and gas industry is regulated, both the technical aspect and commercial aspect, by the Nigeria Upstream Regulatory Commission. That is the upstream segment of the industry. The next slide, please. This is just highlighting some of the focus areas, which is development of regulations, de-risking the frontier basins, the commissioning and abandonment fund, the host community development trust. These are all areas of focus by the commission. But what have we achieved so far in terms of PIA implementation? Next slide, please. A speaker once, that came before me actually spoke about some of the priority regulations, but I can tell you for sure that we have gazetted 5 of those regulations. Regulations 1 to 5 on this list have been gazetted. The last one, which is fees and rent regulations, is already in the process of being gazetted. So these are already what we have achieved so far. In the next slide, you see that we have also gone ahead to work on the other 7 priority regulations, and they have all passed through consultative forums, meaning that we've engaged the stakeholders already. And then what is remaining is drafting with the Minister of Justice and then finally gazetting. So the commission is actually putting all it takes to actually actualize and operationalize the PIA as much as we can. After these 13 regulations, we have another 5, and those 5 priority regulations are also being worked internally. Already they've been drafted and undergoing in-house peer reviews. So you can say that the Upstream Commission has actually achieved quite a lot in the space of time that we have regarding achieving the timelines associated with these priority regulations. The next slide, please. Now, part of what the PIA has helped us to achieve is relaunching of the Nigeria Gas Flare Commercialization Program. Of course, 8 of the input into that before COP27 or during COP27, that Nigeria would be having its guidelines for methane emissions. And true to that, well, based on what you see here, that you see the whole community
You've listened to speakers in the course of their respective action. We were supposed to have Neiti's review of the draft regulations. But a moment ago, you heard Engineer Janice Ayaon also referring to the raft of regulations that have been gazetted and others that are still in the works. So advisedly, therefore, we are bringing forward Neiti's review of the draft regulations, and this will be presented by consultant Dr. Friday Ohuche. Dr. Friday Ohuche will provide a review, and thereafter we'll revert to our earlier format. So we also need to increase the number of seats on the platform, which means that we are accommodating Friday Ohuche now in this particular segment, and there will be no need for a different segment for him. Once they have made their respective presentations, we go to the audience Q&A and see, and then they have their responses, and then we close, get you ready for the next steps. Thank you very much. You can see those, this I believe is, okay.
The Executive Secretary, the Chairman of the Board, and please permit me to stand on existing protocols. My job is to bring up to speed the audience on what Neiti did and is still doing to have their inputs in some of the regulations that have been passed. Speakers have made references to a lot of rules came to Neiti, and Neiti constituted a team, which I played a role to make sure that their inputs into those regulations are considered before it is finally gazetted. So in my presentation, I'm going to, please give me the next slide. My presentation will be very brief. This is the outline. I will go through a few introduction and analysis review. The next slide, please. Well, by way of introduction, I just want to say that PIA 2021 remains a watershed, the development of the oil and gas industry in Nigeria. I mean, no one would have imagined what our oil and gas sector would have been if we don't have a PIA by now. I mean, with what is happening all over the world. So I look at the PIA as a major shift to be able to align the Nigerian oil and gas sector with what the global trends. Well, what is very unique about it? I mean, the first thing is that it opens the industry for competition, and many speakers have made reference to that. Because if we don't make it competitive, and if we make it a monopoly as it has been all these years, we'll keep getting suboptimal results, and which we've known that has not served the nation optimally. Now, the other thing is that it will attract private sector investments. And this is the major focus, to bring in private capital to be able to develop oil and gas in Nigeria. And of course, while we know that those who invest their capital will reap in terms of profit, it will also help to maximize government revenue. And last one, the last of my statement is that the regulations, sorry, okay. Okay, I can actually use this. Okay, of course, when we talk about regulations, we are very well aware that there's no competition that will not be guided by regulations. Every competition must be guided by regulations, rules that will guide them, or else they are not competition. And to be able to do that, it must be results driven. And that is what we are seeing from the presentations we've already listened to, that we are moving towards the main target. The next slide. Now, the question one would ask is, why is Neiti critical to PIA implementation? Why is Neiti critical to this implementation? I would like to share our thoughts in Neiti that oil and gas as extractive resources belongs to one of the critical sectors covered by Neiti mandate. And therefore, Neiti must play a key role in what happens in that space. Oil and gas sector is also a major revenue source for government. And it will certainly benefit from transparency, accountability, and resource application functions of Neiti. And you cannot imagine a situation where, with what Neiti stands for, you have oil and gas reform going on, and Neiti is not at the center of it, because Neiti is about transparency, and transparency will also feature accountability, and accountability will deliver maximum revenue for government. Something that allows government revenue to leak sends a very wrong signal, and it speaks to the real function that Neiti is put in place for the above reasons, to ensure that this national patrimony is appropriately accounted for, and the transparency and effectively serve the interest of majority of Nigerians. Next slide. Now, Neiti is just not a local organization. Neiti is affiliated to Neiti. And because they are affiliated to Neiti, I want to say that Neiti's affiliation to Neiti further validates its role in PI implementation. And that is, what we mean by that is that Neiti adopting key Neiti principles ensures prudent use of natural resources. The second achievement of greater transparency must be regulations as we have them. So these three key, there are many others, but this key almost imperative that Neiti must be at the center of what happens in what happens in having the appropriate regulations to govern the oil and gas industry. Now, next slide. What are the objectives of the review? What do we consider to be the objectives of the review? One is that we want to ensure that the provisions of the regulations conforms with the functional mandate of Neiti as a critical stakeholder in PIA implementation. The second one is to determine whether 8 principles and standards are mainstreamed in PIA regulations as global best practices in resource management. And the last but not the least is to provide recommendations where PIA regulations conflict with the above key guiding objectives. These are the things that more or less set our focus on the PIA regulations we reviewed. Next slide. What approaches we adopt include: one, we employ this review approach that is making sure that we study each of these documents. The first one is the PIA 2007, and the last is the Neiti standards of 2019. Each of these documents were critically reviewed, and we are using our telescope to look at the regulations to see where Neiti mandates are involved. And that is where we now made our own, try to see whether it conforms with Neiti mandate or not, and then make recommendations based on that. Now, the first one is we have to develop a framework, because if you don't develop a framework, you probably will not do a good job of reviewing the PIA regulations. We have this framework on board. The first column is the regulation itself. Which part of the regulation speaks to the are we focusing at? Identify it. Then the second column is what's relevant of the PIA Act this regulation speaking to. And then we move to the next column and then look at that. We say, what is the implication of that act provision to Neiti mandate? And we identified three major Neiti mandates. The first one is transparency. Here, the review will highlight implications for transparency mandate of Neiti. Sorry. The second one is accountability. Here, the review will highlight implications for accountability of mandate of Neiti. Then 80 principles. How do they fit into the 80 principles? And we now look at it and see whether they fit into the 80 principles or they do not fit. And based on that, we can make our recommendations. Another column. We said, what are the global best practices? How are these things done in other climes? To be able to give us an impression whether what we are doing in Nigeria actually conforms with what happens in other jurisdictions. And based on what we've seen, we make our recommendations. And if there are additional comments we need to make, we make them in review. The next slide. Now, we started with the gas pricing regulation. Gas pricing regulation. Under the gas pricing regulation, there are two things we saw that was speaking to Neiti mandates, and that is possible loss of government revenue. If we are not carefully, if we don't take note of what we saw here. The first one is, sorry, can I have the microphone so that I can move around? Yeah, no problem, just keep it. Yeah, please give me the microphone. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so that I can move around. Sorry. Now, the first thing we did was to identify section 4, subsection 1 of the gas pricing regulation. And in that section, this section suggests that there will be two sets of buyers of gas, those for exports and those for private domestic grid. And then the second one is that there will be negotiated prices for those who will buy at market prices and those who will buy at export prices. Now, this very regulation is speaking to section 167(3)(a) of the PIA Act. And in that section, it says the domestic market for natural gas is largely characterized by free market-based contracting for natural gas between willing buyer and the willing seller, based on criteria established by the authorities in conjunction with the stakeholders. So we need to see some conflict. If it is a willing buyer, willing seller market, there is the implication for that. If you say there is going to be two sets of buyers, and what are the implications for Neiti? Creating two different buyer markets for gas will create what we call drop zone in economics. Drop zone is a situation where there's a market situation where a market condition where there are only two large buyers of products and services. It has implication. One is that this could lead to collusion among those buyers to be able to influence price. So, and in that case, they want to create a single monopoly in the purchase of gas. What does this do? The section suggests that negotiated prices for export buyers and market price for domestic buyers, this may introduce differential pricing that could precipitate another subsidy regime. Because if you're not selling at market determined rates, it means that you are either subsidizing A or you are subsidizing B. And then the other point is that subsidy regime creates transparency and accountability challenges, just like we've seen in PMS. And this can lead to loss of revenue. anything that can give us an impression that we're going to be subsidizing is going to create problems for us down the line. And we raised another question. If the gas is mainly used for power, and if the price of power is deregulated, why do we now try to subsidize those who supply gas to power? So this was a concern we identified, and we pointed it out. And in our global practices, we studied what is happening in Angola. We said in Angola, the regulated gas prices apply to all segments of the market, both for public and private use. In advanced economies such as US and Norway, level of the PIA regulation is going to create problems for us down the line. And what is our recommendations? Clarity is required in the issue of differential pricing for gas among different buyers in the same market to avoid a situation of subsidy in the gas sector. Why subsidy in PMS is difficult to handle now was because a faulty market structure was created for it in the beginning. We need to avoid that in the gas sector early enough. That was our recommendation. The next, okay. Now that was what we did. Now we took the second one, upstream and downstream environmental management of air plan regulation. What was proposed in the regulation was section 7, subsection A says monitoring and recording and reporting information about the petroleum operation that are sufficient to enable the commission determine whether, one, the environmental performance objectives and environmental performance standards in the environmental management plan have been met. The second is the implementation strategy in the environmental management plan has been complied with. Now, which sections of the PIA is this referring to? It is referring to section 1(2), subsection A. A licensed or lessee who engages in upstream or midstream petroleum operations shall, within 1 year of the effective date or since 6 months after the grant of application license or the lease, submit for approval an environmental management plan in respect of projects which requires environmental impact assessment to the commission or authority. Let me just say what the problem we have with this section. The problem we have is that there is supposed to be an audit guideline for environmental impact assessment so that Neiti can use that guideline to be able to interrogate whatever is submitted down the line. If we don't have that, the tendency is that people might cut corners. So that is what we recommended. We saw here. And we said, what are the implications? To capture appropriate data of environmental impact of projects in the upstream and downstream sectors of the petroleum industry, there need to be, for us to have to report to comply with environmental impact audit template. I don't know whether we have that. The second aspect of it is that the requirement for monitoring and reporting omitted an environmental impact audit template to guide the reportage of environmental impact breaches based on the set guidelines. If Neiti is going to be following this, what will guide Neiti to know when a particular company has breached this provision or has not breached this provision? So Neiti, which also conducts environmental impact audit, we need such a template in effectively discharging its functions in this regard when the time comes. Well, what did we find in other climes? In other countries such as Saudi Arabia and Qatar, environmental impact audit templates are part of compliance tools that environmental impact assessment must be conversant with. And therefore, we recommended that the regulatory template should provide that template as a guide for successful compliance. That is what we recommended. The next slide. Now, the next this thing we did was conversion and renewal regulations.
You have 2 minutes.
Okay. Conversion and renewal regulations. Now, if you followed the template we developed, you will have also seen where we identified challenges. and we recommended what should be done in it. This has already been taken to the implementation committee. I mean, they've already discussed it and probably affected some of our recommendations. But we're also waiting for more regulations. As more regulations are coming, we are going to be looking at it, pumping it to see areas where such regulations can conflict with Neiti mandate, and therefore we make appropriate regulations. Let me quickly rush through the rest we did. The next slide, let me just quickly rush. We also did upstream petroleum fee and rent regulations and made our recommendations in what we saw. The next slide, upstream environmental remediation fund regulation. This is very, very key because we asked the question, is this fund going to be a pool? Or is it going to be something that each regulator, each firm will just contribute something? If it's not going to be a pool, then there is a problem with that. But if it's a pool, what about if a particular firm breaches environmental conditions that their ability to address is beyond their resource capacity? What happens? So it should be a pool. It should be a pool. So that's what we addressed in this regulation. The next one, petroleum licensing round regulations. Now, bid participants, what the regulation says is that bid participants, somebody can bid and win a bid, but the regulations guiding it may be different at the time he wins, or if the regulation comes into play, if those things that he relied on bidding is now lower or higher, that the commission will say, go ahead. And we found a problem with that. We said, no, it's not the proper thing to do. We need to be able to identify bids that has breached major guidelines and address them going forward. The next. What we regulations had already gone to the committee. We are just waiting for the next set of reviews that we'll also look at and then send back to them. I'm sure that some of the problems we are pointing at may have been corrected in the gazetted forms. Then the last table, just the next one is the last table. The last one, then petroleum royalty regulations. We paid serious attention here because royalty is very important. It's a source of revenue for government. So we paid major attention in addressing this issue. Then based on that, let me quickly say that the review is still ongoing. And as we take in some more reviews, we try to look at them and then send them back to the committee for more effort. But we also say that we wanted to point out the fact that we are focusing on areas that has something to do with Neiti mandate. We cannot go into engineering because we don't have the
consultant to Neiti. This is a bit precarious. So perhaps, yeah, you will. I will invite you to make a comment. Dr. Uche, we will accommodate you on the platform because I imagine that there will be, Dr. Uche, please. All right, okay, you have some of your property at yes. Please, let's appreciate him one more time. As you can see, the issues are getting more interesting. On regulations and cross-cutting matters in the implementation of the PIA. Before we invite the other panelists to make their pitches, the Executive Secretary of Neiti has an intervention, and we will give him 1 minute, 1 minute. If you give him 1 minute, it'll be 10 minutes, so because I know him.
Well, just to reassure all our stakeholders, companies, civil society, and the government representatives here that what the consultants have done is a process. I serve on the steering committee, which is the ministerial committee. But Neiti, there are 4 subcommittees in the PIA, and Neiti's team we are perhaps one of the only agencies allowed membership of all the committees, because the government is interested in MoTech revenues. We align with the civil society, and our own interest is for the citizens in terms of transparency and accountability and good governance of the sector, so that we don't go back to where we're coming from after the law. So once the process reviews this, and then we still send it out to an external person, which is the consultant, to look at what we have done in-house, our technical team have done it, based on the extensive work we have done in the industry. And by the time we put this together, we send them to the steering committee, we send them to the secretariat, and I, as a member of the steering committee, chaired by the Minister of State for Petroleum, my job is also to ensure that these views are reflected in the, so we represent the citizens, the civil society, and also aggregate these interests in the B. If time had allowed us, we would have seen the other extensive job we have done, even in the other area of the model contracts. There are also about 23 model contracts, which we also, but once these regulations are out, we put them on the scale of transparency, accountability, and where it is not weighing at the balance, our job is to raise alarm. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary, for that explanation. So we now go to the members of the panel, and they will speak in the following order. First is the Executive Director, representing the Chief Executive of the Midstream and Downstream Petroleum Regulatory Authority, Dr. Mrs. Zainab Gobri. She will have the microphone, and thereafter we will bring in Lawan Musa again, Group General Manager in the Office of the CEO of NNPC Limited. And thereafter, Mr. Gabriel Ogunjamilusi, representing the FIRS Chairman, will also make a presentation. And then Frank Cheche of KESA will speak. Mark's time for each of the panelists will be 5 minutes. If you do it under 5 minutes, fantastic. And then we'll revert to the audience. Dr. Gobri.
Ladies first. For us at the NMDPRA, we are in full understanding that, we have to maximize the gas opportunity for the decade of gas and actually get to the root, the grassroots citizens with enabling business environment. Our regulations, we published 10 regulations, then we added 2 more, and we had stakeholder events where various stakeholders partake in the regulation to look at it and make corrections and have inputs and so on and so forth. We also work very closely with Neiti. They were in my office like a week ago, and they've been seeing the ACE and the relevant directorates to ensure that there's accountability or transparency. Definitely in NMDPRA, that is our motto. I said at the beginning, if you call any of us, even at 1 a.m., we're ready to serve. Yeah, it's not business as usual for us. We think more like a private sector organization, and we serve the people. So with that being said, I took some notes in regards to your perspective. There are some I agree with. There's some I'm sure we'll probably not agree with, maybe not unless if we expatiate on your thought process, and we'll take it back and look at it. At the end of the day, we're all in this together. It's for Nigeria to be the giant that it is. So we're working as partner. It's all the regulations are on our website. So www.nmdpra.gov.ng, right? And that promotes transparency. So you have access to whatever it is we're doing real time, and your inputs are well noted, because on the website, you can see where we say contact us or express yourself basically, and you can give us a perspective. If you have a new idea, we're ready to listen to it. But like I said, at the end of the day, we are here to serve Nigeria, and we're doing our best and will continue to be compliant and to collaborate with Neiti and other government agencies. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mrs. Gobri. The next panelist, Lawan Musa.
Thank you very much. I think what is really important at this point is we are discussing competitiveness, we are talking around attractiveness. What is important for us really is about understanding advantage barrels. Yes, we have the oil today. Energy transition, yes, is real. But then at the middle of this is actually advantage barrels. What do we mean by advantage barrels? Your fiscal incentive has to be very competitive for new investment to come. Your payback period has to be very short, and your cost has to be low. If you do have this combination, you can compete with solar, you can compete with wind, you can compete with green hydrogen. So it's not about fossil fuel going to zero. Let's understand this energy transition. It's really about energy balance. It's about comparative value. Transport may go low, maybe because of the advent of the EVs. But even within the EVs, you can imagine the heavy duties today, what kind of technology will really drive some of the heavy duty equipments. So to us, the Petroleum Act really provided that platform where we will see advantage barrels now coming from Nigeria. One, our grades are sweet, so even from a sulfur content is low. If we do implement this PIA, you will have the best fiscals around from a prolific point of view. Africa will really take time to transit. We have a switching cost to consider. We do not have energy to power homes today. So it will take a while from an investment on all across, looking at the infrastructure and the power to get you to the point where you can have an EV that you can use, to the point when people can actually switch. So it will take a while. But what is important in the world, even from the concerns of the environmentalists, is something to be debated maybe some decades to come. What will happen to the panels, the solar panels that we have today? They will also generating some environmental concerns down the line. The batteries, who will dispose them and which continent? So let's focus on the competitiveness of the petroleum gas to the car. And I would like to make some And the PIA is encouraging a willing buyer, willing seller structure. That is what you saw in the law. So what this means is until the market gets to a saturation point where the domestic supply is sufficient to meet up the domestic demand, there will be a dual pricing structure. You have the regulated pricing, and you can have a willing buyer, willing seller. Like, for example, today, Azura project is on the basis of a willing buyer, willing seller structure. So you can encourage those who, for example, tying to what the PIA intention is regarding relinquishment of acreages. You can have some brownfields today, not much of oil, but actually have huge gas potentials. That means you can actually relinquish those acreages to those who can actually mature those from a gas development point of view. And then you can have cheaper gas that will come into the market. With the open access on the pipelines, you can actually have lower tariff structure. So it means you can have projects, be it a fertilizer, methanol, whatever type of project that can actually go into a direct willing buyer, willing seller structure. And that will be recognized as part of your domestic gas delivery obligation. So it means you can actually have a willing buyer, willing seller structure. And that could be $3, $4, whatever it's your willing buyer, willing seller structure. But at the same time, you also have the GBIs, who are actually today also having a structured pricing that allows for gas to be sold to the power sector at certain amount. So in terms of the domestic space, when we talk about the domestic market, it's actually not a single buyer. I think that is the major area to correct. So there are pool of buyers from different sectors. Some are gas-based industries, some are power, some are LPG, some are just basic needs. And in each of these, there will be a segment and there will be a pricing. And thank God, the midstream downstream regulatory authority will actually drive that gas pricing. So it will help. So there won't be a single buyer. So there will be competitiveness. One from the supplier side, two from the demand side. And we have the gas aggregation in between. And that is very, very important to understand within the gas value chain. The gas aggregation will take from both, be the escrow manager, so that you can see ability to pay back the upstream. Now that's for the domestic market. So this is a pricing you can see is really vary from customer base to customer base, segment to segment. Then for the export market, because today we deliver gas to Europe, we deliver gas to other continents through the LNG structure. Already there are some pipeline projects are also coming. That will also be through delivery to the Europe. So it means you need to also have an export-based pricing structure. This is for the export market. Should you adopt the same domestic gas pricing to the export market? Definitely no, because your competitors are different. Your delivery market is different. The pricing structure is different. Some will use Harry Hog, some will use different structure. So you need to align to a delivery market. And that's where the export market comes in. So this is really where the two structures that are discussed in the regulation. So it's really not going to create that big problem. But however, I really appreciate the extent of the work. And it also shows really there's need for further engagements. These feedbacks are very critical so that we can actually be able to really drive the market. Do I still have 1 minute or two, or I just hand over?
Yeah, okay, we will give you 30 seconds.
Okay.
Enough time for you to score a goal at the World
Yes,
Cup.
so I think really the main one I really want to make a point is also regarding to competitiveness. We talked about the regulation. You mentioned about the pricing today. Really, subsidies are across the globe. But what is important is what are you subsidizing? Some subsidize public goods, road, utility that you drive is the same with the utility I drive. But the most important thing is the digital bridge between today and tomorrow for any country is education. If this is what we will choose to really subsidize for everybody to have access to, I think from a national point of view, could probably be more better. But today, we need to recognize the importance of PMS into the Nigerian economy, especially with regards to inflation. Yes, to west is through the diesel-driven engine. Truck out general aggregate prices. But why is the mess? It's basically lack of enough consumer protection. This is what I think we need attention to. Two, decision to really subsidize what? And for us as NNPC Limited, for example, we are the supplier of last resort and will be able to support the market to ensure energy sufficiency in line with the new mandate in a commercially structured manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Lawan Musa. I hope the last point that he made is not lost. When he talked about powering an SUV with probably just one passenger who is a driver also, or a driver and a passenger, and an 18-seater bus. You can see the comparison there, very significant. So perhaps what we should start by saying that we will instruct the security men here at Transcorp to prevent all SUVs from leaving the premises of Transcorp. And then we'll begin to discipline ourselves with regard to our fuel consumption. Once again, Lawan Musa, thank you very much. Let's now bring in the representative of the chairman of FRS, and that will be Mr. Gabriel Ogunjemelusi.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. The PIB has definitely changed certain things in the fiscal aspect. As the earlier presenter made mention, it has brought in dual tax system for upstream petroleum production, crude production. You have hydrocarbon tax and you have companies income tax. But for gas at the upstream level is going to be subject to tax only at companies income tax. And also there are some fiscal incentives for even associated gas. It's not totally, the ACFAD was not totally removed. Those costs incurred up to upstream measurement point is still treated as part of upstream production costs. Apart from that, there are other incentives that the fiscal incentive fiscal brought into bear. The rate of tax definitely has reduced as we mentioned, but the critical thing now is that mostly license now determines the rate of tax to be applicable. Or the marginal feed are going to, there are no more marginal feed are going to be issued with licenses, maybe PML. If you are marginal feed operator, you're having PML, you are not going to pay tax at 30%, it goes to be at 50% hydrocarbon tax, and SITA 30%. So these are some incentives also for local productions, indigenous participation in the oil and gas upstream to encourage them. As it is, there is not that taxpayers are saying that that's enough. They still want more. At least yesterday we still had engagement with some of them. They're asking for more incentives, and definitely, which is normal. Taxpayers want to have more, but whereas government also is looking to do. We want to give you more, but there must be some money that is flowing to the purse of the government to be able to fund the budget. The IFRS has come up with some information circular to explain the treatment to be given to some of the aspects of the law, just to aid the understanding of the taxpayers. And the beauty of this one is that when we did it, was not FRA document, it was our document. Everybody participated in coming up with the information circular, and we did engagement. We invited them to make presentation to us. And also, let me also say that even the preparation of the PIA, the PIB itself, before it became PIA, input were invited, were taken from almost all the stakeholders. And the beauty of it that we consider all, and they were taken in on board. And where we were not disposed to take their suggestion, we let them know the reason why it would not be. So it had been, the things are no longer what it used to be in the oil and gas industry. Things are more open now than before, though we are not yet 100% there, but we can still do better. We can do better. FRS has come up the structure, do some kind of structural alignment to be able to implement the PI properly. At the oil and gas department now, we have segregated into midstream, downstreams, and upstream offices. Training officers to be able to handle each sectors, different professionally. And we are also putting training in place to train our staff to be able to deliver. I would say that FRS is making progress to get ready for the implementation. The first filing of the returns under PIA for the upstream will happen next year, February, and we are waiting. Though the conversion, there are some that said that they wanted to convert early, which they said that we have accommodated in the information circular. Then also it should also be noted that the PPTA will still be active, and also the deep offshore inland basin will still be active. These were saved act. So we should not doubt that at the back of our mind that PPTA and deep offshore will no longer be still with us. I think we just did some renegotiation of some contracts, which may take it for the next 20 years for them to still be on the old law. So that should be at the back of our mind, so that when we are going around, we know that yes, PPTA and deep offshore is not there with us. So we are ready for FRS, and I thank Neiti for what they are doing. This engagement is very important, and they are putting everybody to be available, and the companies also know that their information should be made available so that it will be seen by all. Nothing more to be done under the table. Let's put everything on the table for everybody to see. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Gabriel Ogunjemilusi, representative of the chairman of FRS. The final comment from amongst the panelists will be by Frank Tietie of the of the Citizens Advocacy for Social Economic Rights, CASA. Frank, also a lawyer.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kingsley Osadolo, a senior colleague, and I'm sure your typical manner of presentation of Good Morning Nigeria, you sought to educate this gathering on what regulations are. What you didn't say is that regulations sometimes can be more powerful than the law, giving them power. Neiti has its own fair share of the powers in Section 17 of the Neiti Act, meaning that Neiti can make regulations. The thing about regulation is that the National Assembly makes a very small package of law and then it's implemented by the executive. In course of implementing it, we often hear about delegated legislation. What make new process actually is to ensure that resource-rich countries like Nigeria, the citizens of such countries benefit from the deposits of such resources. We are here in this whole well-structured arrangement. We put a lot of complex structures and technical expertise, but it all boils down to exploration and extraction of resources, either in the Niger Delta for crude oil or across the country for other forms of resources. Today, we are dealing with the Petroleum Industry Act. I find it very curious, and I think this deserves commendation. It's not our usual Nigerian way. The speed with which the implementation committee of the Petroleum Industry Act went into demonstrating the mandates that were given according to the law, it's quite impressive and demands a lot of commendation. It's also impressive that the Nigerian Upstream Commission was able to put together a regulation that dealt with the issue of host communities. Because when you look at the issue of oil exploration and mining, today our country appears to be on its knees with regards to revenue because of issues like oil theft, which are basically things that have to do more with the politics in the host communities. Whether we know that some companies, some licensees are actually involved with, together with some international oil companies. We know all of that. Thank you very much, sir. The emphasis must be placed on the host communities. A smart country like Nigeria would make an innovation like paying 4 billion naira to a non-state actor to protect oil installations, because the structures we have put together, either at the NNPC towers or at the new commissions and the authority, the new commission and the authority that we have today, we only show compliance to global standards, global practices, whereas the actual thing, the politics of oil exploration and what goes on in the host community have shown that they matter more to the product of petroleum as we speak. So I look at the regulation on the NURPC regulation on host communities, which is quite responsive. It's a very new piece of legislation, piece of legislation, because it actually emanates from the PIA. Section 37 appears to give too much discretion to a settlor or a licensee, or particularly mentions a settlor in that regard. In terms of the very burning issue of vandalism, because we also recall lately, as we just experienced the discovery of about the commencement of drilling of oil in northern Nigeria, the politics of the 3% of operating expenses being the main fund for host communities came up. So how would it? So what is good for the goose is also good for the gander. But when such resources that will go to host communities are affected by issues that are termed presumptuously as vandalism by members of the host community, as it appears in Section 37, I think it requires a bit more interrogation, given the fact that this is a new legislation just done, I think June or July, so it hasn't really been tested. But the real worry there is that Neiti is concerned about issues of accountability in extractives in general. So when you now allow the settlor to report an issue of vandalism and to give the settlor such wide latitude to determine what kind of vandalism it was, whether it was natural or technical or intervention by third parties, but when it also goes to align the settlor to give the report and determine the amount costs for repair and the amount of loss of crude oil, for example, and to give all of that, though subject, and I think is commendable, subject to a further investigation by a joint committee. But in practice, we've seen that such earlier regulatory agencies in the environment and the issues of oil spill will rely essentially on the report and make recommendations or allow such. In this case, it will affect a lot of revenue, profits, and what accounts not only to the country, but even to the host community. I believe if you read closely Neiti mandate, it also includes how much of those structures, whether the management committee or the host trust development committee, how well they apply such funds. Now, these are issues that require a lot of close monitoring. What is more important is that we should avoid a situation where the PIA has now come, we are praising it. Let it not be that the era of the global memorandum of understanding in host communities did better, fostered more peace, tranquility, and easier flow of crude oil than the application of the regulations pursuant to the Petroleum Industry Act. In conclusion, I would say that that all of them in the host communities, I have a bit of bias because I witnessed these politics and these conflicts personally in the host communities. The bias is that they are all government agencies, whether Neiti, whether Nostra or Nesria or the new ones, the authority and the commission together with the NNPC or the IOCs who are mainly the settlers, they are from government. So there will be need for greater assurance in host communities that this law is being and the regulations are being implemented in fairness to their interest. We should avoid where they say where tempers rise. In closing, I refer to the ITO recent spill, gas and oil spill in Bayelsa. So where tempers will rise to a point where no other person will listen to a reason or to technical reports. But all of these can actually be averted if confidence is increased. And again, if the regulations as they are get peace, and then the whole overall objective of the Petroleum Industry Act will be achieved. Thank you very much.
Best experience, I was in the Niger Delta for 12 years. And what I did was environmental management, joint investigation visits. I know the expectation, the way the law is written or the way the regulation is written does not in any way take out or take away the import of JIVs, joint investigation visits, which determines the cost, the quantity and extent of the spill that occurred in the area, right? But you also expect the owner of the facility to submit a report, okay? So it does not mean, because the owner of the facility would have to submit a report to the commission or perhaps the authority, depending on, the jurisdiction of the spillage. But that does not take away that there would be an independent joint investigation visit by all stakeholders, including the communities. And I also like to say, like you mentioned, the host community regulation, passed through the consultative process where the host communities had engagement, with the commission and other stakeholders, before the arrival of what we have in print right now. Any regulation or any law, including the PIA, while you enact a law or you enact a regulation, there is a monitoring period. You also monitor to see the impact, the performance of the regulation or the law. So in any case, we have the confidence and we are in good faith who believe that the regulation and the law would achieve its objective. However, the process will be monitored, like you mentioned, as we go to see that the desired objective, which is to actually create that harmony between the host community and the producers, and not have a situation whereby the facilities are shut down and production is shut down because of this harmony. The regulation will monitor to ensure that such things don't happen and that its objective is quite achieved.
All right, thank you very much, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Just a minute. As we said, we've listened to the panelists, and in between we had some intermediate interventions. So our recourse now will be to the audience. If you have a comment or a question, kindly signify by raising your hand. And so take a number of hands up. We're going to take we'll take 4. In each case, as hand numbers. Chris, please kindly assist. There is a lady over there. That's number 1. Chris, the lady in black, that's number 1. The gentleman, the lady, please kindly raise your hand again. That's that's number 1. Then the gentleman, Chris, just hold on a second, Chris. That's number 1. The gentleman over there, that will be number 2. We'll come back to the front here, number 3. And then we'll go back to the gentleman over there. That's the light gray jacket. That will be number 4. Kindly identify yourself and your affiliation, and then make your comment or your intervention or question as brief as possible. And if you have any direct question to the panelists, indicate so that the person notes it and be in a position to respond. So the first 4 we take now, we take another set of 4, and then we'll call it time for this segment.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Engineer Dr. Yetunde Aladeito. I'm a member of the Association of Professional Women Engineers of Nigeria. My question is this, it's more or less like a general question. We all know that the objective of the PIA, basically one of the objectives, is to try to encourage prospecting of oil and gas. And we also know about the Nigerian Energy Transition Plan, where we want to achieve carbon neutrality by 2060. So how do we really address this contradiction between the PIA and also the Nigerian Energy Transition Plan? Because like we all know, we're told that today is kind of marking the beginning of drilling in the the Bauchi-Gombe Basin. So how do we address this? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Moses Oluwaseyi from Care Initiative. And my question is actually directed to Mr. Lawan Musa. During your intervention, you actually made mention of the plan to have export pipes in terms of being able to export gas. And I just want to ask, one, what are the technology that are planned or put in place to ensure that this is achieved, especially from the challenges we've had over the years around being able to have direct or total being accountable for the number of exports around our crude oil in terms of metering that have been challenged over the years. So what are the technology that are planned to be in place in terms of ensuring that whatever exports that is being made around gas after the transition, that of course we are being able to be accountable for this? And lastly, what plans are also in place to ensure that domestic need for gas will be met? Because over the years, we've known that at the end of the day, the number of exports tends to be much more lucrative and domestic needs are actually affected. So what are the plans that are put in place? Thank you very much.
I'm Gloria Okolugbo. I had been engaging with Neiti for some time before I got into the energy sector, former Commissioner Energy. First, I want to commend Neiti for the observation about the act, the dual pricing regime, domestic and exports. I want us to, I would also want to encourage Neiti to zero in on that, particularly in other stakeholder forums where you can actually sit down. An act is not the end of the matter. It's very important. And he also observed that there'll be more stakeholder discussions. We know how protracted the issue of subsidy has been with PMS. And we know the effect on our economy. Neiti has actually done a lot. I think the success I can take from here is that work that you did there for the future of Nigeria. There's so many clauses that we can put in that act that will make sure that that part is not ambiguous, because for so long as it is ambiguous, it is subject to multiple interpretation and abuse. So that's my intervention. Thank you. Any other forum I could talk more about energy?
Thank you. My name is Engineer Victor Georgeson from NUPROC. My comment is I would have loved to see somebody from the industry seated there at the panel to actually give us their impression about the PIA so far, because they are at the short end of the stick. We will say, I would have loved to hear from them so far how they compare the PIA as it is with the previous conditions, especially with respect to Section 2A of the PIA, which states that we create efficient and effective governing institutions with clear and separate roles for the petroleum industry. Can we say today that we achieved that with the institutions created from PIA and how they are operating today? Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We'll get responses from the panelists. I mean, of course, there's a direct question for you, Musa. Also another one for you. Let's start off with Dr. Huche, and then Musa and Dr. Gobri and engineer.
Thank you very much. I wanted to make some comments before we go to the public, but then the question has now arisen where I can make that comment. It's from what Madam Delat said. Straight away, what we have to be very careful with, and I'm going to link it up with what the debate about the dual pricing, is that we must be conscious of the kind of market structure we create down the line. Because if we create a market structure that is not quite clear, we can fall into what might be termed regulatory trap. So a situation where we are now saying, okay, there is domestic market, there is external market, let's address their problems now. How to solve that is to put a sunset clause. What I mean by sunset clause is that this will operate in the next 10, 15 years, and we review. Because if we don't put a sunset clause, by the time it gets to that level, some people will become so comfortable with the pricing regime that is not actually in the benefit of the country, and it becomes difficult to reverse. So that is critical. The answer to what you've said, Madam, is that there should be a sunset clause. I'm not saying that we cannot experiment with that now, because ours is a complex. I was a member of the IMF team that developed the original policy concept for PIB. That was around 2009. And it was basically a free market policy. But because of the nature of our federation, and the peculiar circumstances of our entity, we began to tamper with it up to what we have now. What we have now is a very loose system that we need to safeguard ourselves by putting sunset clause to them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think there are some couple of contributions, very good contributions. Number one talked about the conflict on the net zero and the PIA sort of. I think it's a question of clarity. There's no conflict. Net zero is not about zero oil. So let's understand. It's about net emission. So you can actually have a carbon capture. You can actually do quite a number of interventions. You still produce the oil. But what is important is as I produce and emit the carbon, I also make sure I have a compensation mechanism that nets it up. So that is net zero. Does not mean zero oil. So that I can produce the oil. That's why we said it's about advantage barrels, being able to produce and being able to be innovative. So technology will do a good help in this regard. For example, the pipelines we're doing today will cut down your methane emissions because you actually be able to channel the gas. The gas flare commercialization you're doing will also cut down your flare. So it will reduce, and after all, let's even from a regional perspective, Africa is really not emitting. If you look at it contextually. But that being said, net zero is really about being able to be more environmentally friendly in your production. If you do not spill, you do not spoil the environment. And this is where technology will come in. So definitely, if you want to look at it from a zero point of view, I think we should rather even look at it from if you do not invest in exploration and development, you will get to zero oil by 2060. And I can give you the statistics. If you're producing 2 million to 2.4 million barrels today, your reserve is about 38 billion, even if you take it to 40 billion, for example. If you keep producing 2 million barrels per day, just do the maths. In 40 years, you will go zero oil. But that's a very unplanned exit. So it's not about zero oil. And that's why you now need to replace. You do reserve replacements so that you continue to produce the oil, but in a more efficient manner. So that is the key question. And that is what I think you should hold the industry accountable for going forward. Then the next question is around the technologies to deliver gas. I think two things are very important. One, you talked about concerns around either loss. For gas, it's completely different from oil. Nobody blow up the gas and take the gas. You blow the gas and you go with it. It's not like oil. So there's no economic incentive to blow up a gas pipeline. You blow up a gas pipeline, you die right, you just die there. So, but what you need is the measurements. So you need technologies for measuring accuracies. And even today, if you look at the domestic gas, you have the transpass meters and the rest. So they're all installed, they're automated. There are a lot of also innovation going on as you regards, talking about the measurements. The pipelines now come with, smart chips that actually measures your flow and the pressure and the rest. So you can have a better, technology. And all of these are all lined up. Fiber optics are laid across the pipeline right of way and the rest. So you see huge investments are going on in town. That's one thing I think we need to understand. Two, in terms of basic delivery, is just the pipeline. And already the pipelines are being financed. So it's not a government-led funding. That is one important thing we need to know. So these are bankable projects. And for gas, nobody invests in any infrastructure without seeing the market. So it's a back end working. There is a ready market. There's a pricing structure that will account for the upstream gas and will also account for the tariff. So it's already a delivered commercial commitment that is bankable. And that means your pipeline technology, the pipeline cost, the pipeline project, all has to tie in to make an economic sense before the project can take FID. So this is the difference. So any gas infrastructure or gas project you can see now in the line, there's already a commercial decision that supports the decision to go in. So it's something that is very, very possible. It's very practical. And we look forward to see more of this, the Trans-Saharan, the Morocco, the internal gas pipelines. Today, OB3 is almost completed. We have the ELVs and the ELVs2 all linking back to the south, to the west. And this is the way the economy will go. So technologies are available. The funding structure is available. The financing and also the partner structure are all available. And we are confident that this is really where Nigeria will catch up in terms of value. Now, the next thing is the next question on the gas plan.
Musa, thanks. Let's go over to Dr. Gobri to make to respond to the issues raised.
The House that we had a meeting like 3 weeks ago. So usually how that goes is we have the IOCs and all the industry players in a room just like this, and we discuss. Each sector, that's the we deal with the host community issues. So we take it, the PIA takes that very, very seriously. We have contact. The third thing is, I'm well aware that the NNPC and some agencies have ways now of knowing what's going on in the field. You don't have to go there. We have technology out there to tell you what's going on in the field, what pipelines are out there, and what is being utilized for and how it's being utilized. That was announced a month ago, I believe, or 2 months ago. It was launched by the NNPC. I was fortunate to be there to see it. So I think we've been able to mitigate at least, I said, 70% of information we never used to have access to in the first place. So it's a gradual process. You're also a very, very important partner. Neiti is a very, very important partner for us, the regulators. So, any inputs and Nigerians as a whole, because this is your investment also, affects you and I at the end of the day. So we're working for you, and we continue to strive to work harder and deliver beyond your expectation, God willing.
Well, just a quick one on the energy transition and the conflict. Nigeria and other African or less developed countries have various circumstances, and they have their choice towards the net zero pathway. We don't have to do exactly just like we are copying other nations. We have our own pathway towards net zero. And just like my colleague said, for us, we've chosen gas, which is a less carbon fuel, as our transition fuel, on our pathway to net zero, while we implement the other sustainable resource exploitation management practices, in the process. Just needed to mention that. But I think someone asked a question about meeting domestic needs. Besides the national gas demand requirement, which is established by the authority, the commission takes that national gas demand requirement and allocate the domestic gas delivery obligations to the producers. Now, what is allocated based on the PIA Schedule 3 would be low-cost gas. Low-cost gas. So what that means is, again, it also takes care of a little bit the concern about the pricing for export and domestic, because the idea is this. The commission also determines what is called the supply price, domestic supply price, which becomes the basis for the authority to determine the base price. Now, how does it work? The industry is expected, each company has to supply to us what is called their supply curve, right? Now, the idea is this. There is a condition of price at which a company would voluntarily supply gas to the domestic market. The company determines that market price, right? So when we aggregate, so the commission aggregates the various market prices and the volumes associated with that, at the volume whereby the national gas demand requirement is met, the price at that volume in the curve, in the supply curve, becomes what we call this domestic supply price. Now, that is the minimum price, which makes economic sense for the operators to supply to the domestic market. In that case, it wouldn't be a competition between the export and the domestic market. Mind you, I just said that what is expected to come to the domestic market is the low-cost supply gases. And what are they? Associated gas, for instance. The idea is that associated gas is already paid for by oil facilities that are already produced. Or maybe gas cap, low down gas cap. Already the oil has already paid for the cost of investment. There's already a wellhead in that structure. All you need to do is to produce the gas. So these are low cost price gas that are required to be supplied to the domestic market. With this kind of gas supplied to the domestic market, the price disparity wouldn't quite be a problem.
All right, thank you very much, Engineer Janet Ayan, for your explanation. Tete, we will have the opportunity for the closing comments. There was no question directed. Yes, Labiola, please take the microphone. Just a few issues to clarify before we come back to the audience. I'm listening to the issues around domestic gas supply and so on and so forth. I think the point was also made about poor consumer protection. There are a number of issues on the table. The consumer will ask himself, how much did I buy a 12.5 kg gas 2 years ago? How much am I buying it today? These are the things people are looking for. You know, some of these headline issues around how you work it out, whether associated gas, non-associated gas, those things are, they are issues, you know. They will ask themselves that question. If you say you want gas to penetrate the market further and the price per kg is going up, how do you penetrate the market? I use a ready example. I'm sure every morning in Nigerian cities, just hang on a second, please. Can we have some quiet? I use the example, what I refer to as the breakfast economy. You will see people who are buying akara, all those workmen you see, and even some of us, we also buy akara in the morning, not so? Others will buy Indomie, and so on and so forth. Ask yourself, how many of those persons frying akara use gas? And then you would know how many trees are sentenced to death every morning to keep the breakfast economy going. So how do people then have access to gas? The last time I bought gas, 12.5 kg, was 10,500 naira. In this same city, I used to buy gas, 12.5 kg for 3,500 naira. Then go to the power sector. The thermal power stations, 10 or 11 of them were established to utilize gas. The excuses we used to hear from them will be overpricing, supply XYZ. They shut down. When they shut down, it trips off the transmission. And then when it trips off the transmission, Oshogbo goes off, and then you hear another crash of the transmission network. So from the consumer point of view, going forward, I'm sure that when you have the next stakeholder engagement, people want to hear how some of these issues have been sorted out and how now going to the gas decade, we are now buying gas for 2,500 naira for 12.5 kg. So, whether subsidy, you are subsidizing for production of the breakfast economy, as I said. Sorry, the gentleman from the commission, you raised an issue about your desire of having an operator from the oil and gas industry on the panel. If you take a look at the program agenda, Seplat Energy was supposed to be available for this conversation. Unfortunately, Seplat wasn't around. At the beginning of the program, I also introduced and recognized Dr. Yaki Ogon, who is from Ajib Oil. I doubt if Dr. Ogon is still in the audience. You're still there. Oh, I'm sorry. But now we will give you an opportunity to make a comment on the issues identified by the commission person. But let's have a show of hands. I will take the last set of 4 interventions before we revert to the panelists. All right. Number 1, number 2, Ajib, number 3. Then I will take a lady. Okay, all right, we'll make Ajib additional. Make about short and sharp. So once again, let's take the numbers. Number 1, number 2, lady over there, number 3, and the gentleman right at the back. Okay, gentleman at the back, number 4. So attachment, Ajib, first attachment, second attachment. That will be 6. So let's manage the time very well, please. Yes, we took the lady. We already took the lady. So 1, 2, 3, 4, attachment 1, attachment 2. Again, kindly introduce yourself and your affiliation and short and sharp for your comment or Q&A.
All right. My name is Dr. Ilya Gashimbaki. I represent the Northeast on the board of Neiti. It's actually not a question, but rather a response to the gentleman from the commission, because it appears that question was not addressed. It's not only him, a lot of Nigerians are in a hurry to see how fast, especially the agencies that have been created, how transformative they are going to be. But again, my own response to that is that we've been stuck where we are, I think, for the past half a century. PIA was just passed in 2021. So if you look at it, that's a huge achievement on its own. Already, PIA as it is today is due for review because there are issues that we have seen as an aftermath of the PIA itself. But what is remarkable is the regulations that have been drafted so far. Personally, I'm impressed to know that we've been able to do about 6 regulations and much more to come up. So in a nutshell, I think the journey has started. It's a remarkable achievement after everything has vegetated in the last 60 years. We are making progress in the role overall when you put it on a scale. This is not a defense to the authority or the commission to not to be as competitive as you should be. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Awowo Christian. I represent South in the Neiti board. Before the PIA, I want to talk on environmental compliance monitoring, which is the environmental law allows oil companies to carry out monitoring of their environment and report to the regulators to keep compliance with what they are doing in the environment. Before the PIA, we saw that the IOCs comply with environmental compliance monitoring, but the local players hardly do. Probably because there is no disclosure of who is actually monitoring or who is not monitoring. In the PIA era, how are we going to address that? Is it captured in the regulations we have? Then secondly, the Host Community Development Fund, which has been created in the PIA, and the gas flaring penalty that is also to go for the development. I want to ask engineer there, who is representing the commission, if it is active. And also the 5% gas infrastructure development fund, which is to be deducted from the bulk procurement of petroleum products and the gas, if it is also active. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. My name is Engineer Dr. Elizabeth Jumoke Terrigo, the president of the Association of Professional Women Engineers of Nigeria, APWEN. I want to commend all the speakers for their contributions. But my question has to do with the issue of Nigerian border. We know that the theft issue is not just what we see on the sea. In the far north, everywhere our border is very porous. Is there anything, as much as we want to concentrate on this issue of oil, is there anything in the PIA that has taken care of that as far as the border is concerned? Because the nearer our neighbors, the countries around us, the price for fuel is quite higher than what we have in Nigeria. So people take, you just load the truck and it's out of the country. Is there anything in PIA that is handling that to make sure that the issue of theft of oil outside Nigeria is curtailed from our borders? Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Uche Wabara. From the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation, and Fiscal Commission. As some of you may be aware, one of the core mandates of the commission is to monitor revenue accruing to the Federation account and how it is disbursed. So I'm going to speak from that perspective. Now, the PIA, there is a consensus by almost all the stakeholders that the PIA in the short term and perhaps in the middle term is going to impact negatively on revenue accrual into the Federation account. It's on record that the former minister, Kachuku, told the whole country that based on his own calculation, he's looking at a 50% reduction. Different other experts put the impact of the PIA, if implemented as it is, put the revenue reduction at 20% or more. So, and the question is, why will Nigeria at this point implement a law that will be taking about 20% of revenue from the Federation? Remember, every one of us from here belongs to a state or local government. So we are all going to take the hit. It is true that it has been said, going forward with improved incentive, perhaps more investments will come, and maybe in the long run, the Federation may start gaining. But why should we take 20% hit reduction at this time? An issue of competitiveness. One will also ask, the reason why are foreign investors not bringing investment to the oil industry in the past 10, 15 years? Was it because of the fiscal regime? No, but the reason was, we all know the reason. Poor governance issue, security, hostile operational environment. Have these things been taken away that will help to drive investment now?
All right, thank you very much.
One more example, please.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
It's very important, please.
Okay, quickly.
For instance, NNPC in the Act, it says NNPC will take 10% of profit oil and gas as management fee for the Federation. How can you just fix that without consultation with the Federation? You fix your rate. Then another 30% we go to the Frontier Exploration Fund, making it 40%. So leaving only 60% for the whole Federation. So I think I want to advise the steering committee, please, there is a need, there may be a need to look at how this revenue is impacting the Federation, because at the end of the day, it's about how much government take. Petroleum is a finite resources. So the government must maximize its revenue now and always. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comment and intervention. Most respectfully, attachment number 1.
Okay, once again, thank you, Neiti, for organizing this forum to be able to x-ray the issues in the industry and how you have also helped in addressing some of them to be in compliance with the international best practice. The area of concern has been the gas pricing. If we can make it market reflective such that we don't discriminate between some buyers like say power and industry, that will enhance investment in the sector. I think that has been the concern of even OPTS, which I belong to, that willing seller, willing buyer will increase investment in any sector, especially in the gas area. We have been noted to be a gas country instead of oil. And if you look at the data produced by DPR, I think as at 2019, out of about 8 billion cubic feet of gas produced per day, about 17% was still being reinjected, which presupposes that there were no enough off-takers. So if we make it willing seller, willing buyer, then such investment will go to, eventually go to off-takers and encourage more investment in such an area. I think that is the area that OPTS is concerned about.
Thank you very much. Again, most respectfully, attachment number 2.
Thank you very much for accommodating me last minute. My name is Uzo Obienu. I'm a partner with KPMG, and I've been privileged to support the PIA journey, both from the implementation working group and as a firm in trying to help to establish world-class processes and procedures for the entities. As I look at the PIA, and I also look at the topic of this panel conversation, imperatives for a viable, competitive, reformed oil and gas industry, I think about all the work that we have done, both at the implementation working group and all the work that is being done at the level of the institutions. And one thing that comes to mind, which a few of the last set of speakers have in a way touched, is that how do we take all that work, all that fiscal incentives? We've talked about the fact that we'll be losing revenue and all that, and then we put it on top of organized crime. By organized crime, I'd say that, look, we're not dealing with host community issues as some people tout it to be. We're dealing with real issues of organized crime in the form of theft. All that work, Lawal, that we've done, and the whole lot of other people in this room have done. Neiti, I know most of you will see all at the PTDF Secretariat. We will not see the gains until we address the critical issues, particularly oil theft. You know, the fact is that there's a connection. There's something that actually connects the oil and gas industry. You think about the crude. If you want to increase rig count, you need to think about investment. If you want to increase gas, you need to think about investment. All of that will come when I am sure that I can take full benefits of the investments that I am making in the nation. Without that, honestly speaking, we will struggle to see the benefits of the PIA. We have put in so much work. We have put in sleepless nights. Before taking the flight to this place, I still worked on a PIA piece of work overnight before I left. And I am thinking about it. I am saying that, no, that cannot go to waste. We need to address those fundamental issues. And that way we can begin to see the gains of the PIA. Quick comment to also mention that, look, as I'm a strong advocate for the bifurcation of the industry, that's the upstream and the midstream and downstream subsectors of the oil and gas industry. But as we think of investment, I have said in a few forums where I've been able to speak that, look, as we think of investment in the oil and gas industry, we must think about it as one. For short of a better description, think of it like an NIPC of the oil and gas industry. Lawal said some things that, look, we need to get the crude off the ground. We need to get the gas off the ground. We need to get the resources off the ground. My belief is that in our journey to recovery as a nation, there is no way you can discount the role of the oil and gas industry. It practically brought us where we are, and it has the capacity to take us out of the misery that we are in. But we have to be serious about it, and we have to work together. It's one unit for the purposes of attracting investment, call it a clearinghouse that ensures that as we get the inquiries for investments, that we are organized in a way that we can deliver. Think about your interface with the public. How automated have they all become in such a way that we can receive and run with an investment a pitch from anywhere and ensure that we see it through? There are a few misconceptions around a number of things, and I think that an opportunity such like Neiti has created today gives us opportunity to clear a few things. There's always the talk around 30% that goes to the frontier exploration, but it's not exactly 30% of NNPC's profit. It's talking about 30% from your profits from the production sharing contract. So it's a portion of the profits. It could be significant. And then if we look at it again, it's also being fed into supposedly to generate additional revenue for the government, because it goes into exploration that then increases production. But it's one thing that is clear is that we need to engage some more. Industry players need to talk to each other. We need to disabuse our minds sometimes. And then in other instances, we need to also take feedback from each other and see how we can implement it. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Wow. Thank you very much there. From KPMG, I had said, we were taking you as attachment number 2. Thank you very much. I had said we're taking you as attachment number 2, and you've raised very valid issues as well as responding to the queries by one of the other respondents. And for also drawing attention one more time to the bigger issues of the Al Capone in the Nigerian oil and gas industry. Those who are behind the organized crime that is going on, the industrial scale crime about oil and gas. So we will revert to the panelists, but we're getting pressed for time. I would like to be out of here according to what we had earlier scheduled. So I'm sure there are issues you would like to respond to, and you also frame your closing thoughts around those issues. Each would have 2 minutes max to do that, and then we'll call it time. The conversation obviously has started. It's not ending today. There will be more and more opportunities for a review of the progress we are making on this journey on the PIA. So, gentlemen, and Madam just stepped out. I'll revert to you, and you make your. I know that Frank Chetia, earlier you were itching to say something, so might as well begin from left to right. 2 minutes max. If you do it in 90 seconds, that will just be fine. 90 seconds, that will just be fine. This is World Cup season, and I'm sure those of us who are sitting here, you heard what happened already. Saudi Arabia taking on Argentina, one of the favorites of the World Cup, in their opening match. Lionel Messi scored the first goal via a penalty. End result, Saudi Arabia 2, Argentina 1.
All right, that is. Thank you very much. I think we just witnessed the broadcasters' effect when they report news. It comes with such a suave that it creates a different reaction. There isn't much to say except with regards to confidence building measures. I want to thank the representative of the South-South, Mr. Christian, for that intervention, because it would have appeared to me that host community issues, that is, the audience is not interested in host community issues. After all, they are very far away, whereas they are the main thing, just like the KPMG man has alluded to the fact that they may not necessarily be the ones responsible for the organized theft of crude oil, but they can have a lot to do in preventing it. So my closing comment has to do, like I said, with confidence building measures on the part of the authority and the commission. If you look at the provisions for the Host Community Development Fund in the Petroleum Industry Act, it creates a scenario that elicits a lot of transparency in investment, and the NURPC regulations did justice to that commendably. Now, that being said, when Dr. Oji intervened after Mr. Ohuche's presentation, he talked about the whole idea of the ITA process being driven by the civil society. Now, civil society operates more with data, and it does much of its work is research. When I started my work as a civil society practitioner, I thought it was more of activism, but I've come to realize the need for accuracy in data collection and application, meaning that the standard of communication, especially in the area of freedom or access to information, will be very important. The frameworks that have been set up by the NURPC for the host community reporting, both for the operators and the host community managers, whether they are advisors or committee members, is very important. I'll close by emphasizing that the commission and the authority should manage their reporting standard in such a manner, particularly through their website, that these reports, whether reports by the management committee of the host communities or by the interventions by the operators, also be published. So it's not enough to give these templates or to give these frameworks, and this will build a lot of confidence on the part of those who are in the host community, so that, because it's important that when the members of this host community see what come in terms of resources to the community and how they are expended, budgets and implementations, especially investments of funds and appointment of fund managers, together with investigations. When there is a greater level of transparency, it will build their confidence, and you will see that they will actually exhibit more interest in ensuring that these oil installations are protected, because they will not drive that connection that it is in their interest that oil exploration is going on. So there is a need for more transparency, and those reports and publications should actually be made in such a manner that your websites, I'm talking about the Commission and the authority, redesign their websites to accommodate all of these reports, no matter how flimsy they appear.
Thank you. Again, thank you to the representative from the South. One of your questions was whether the flare payment is still active, and the answer is yes. The gas flare payment is paid in the same manner as royalty payments are made. And what that means is that they are paid to the Federation account. That is what the law says, that it has to be paid in the same manner that royalty payments are made. So they are paid to the Federation account. That's on that part. Environmental management. So the gas flare payment, the utilization of that fund is for host community remediation, environmental remediation. So, but what I'm telling you is the administration of that transference of the payment for the remediation purpose is not within the purview of the commission. The commission's purview is to collect that payment and pay it to the Federation account as prescribed by law. So how that is now transferred for the utilization for the remediation is a different thing altogether. So yes, of course, from the regulations that are coming out, the nitty-gritties and details of how that will work out would take care of that, certainly, yes. Then I also want to mention that Section 102 actually is dedicated to environmental management. So you asked the question whether is there the same kind of attention paid to, to local players or environmental management, before the PIA and after the PIA? The answer is yes. There is actually heightened attention paid to environmental management. I'm sure you're also aware that there is also the decommissioning fund that is now brought in by the PIA. What that means is that any impact on the environment must actually be taken care of at the end of any exploitation or exploration activities. So indeed, there is a lot of attention, on environmental management in this regime of the PIA. Then, just so that I can conclude, I just have my 2 minutes. What we would continue to do as commission is listen and ensure the transparency that the industry and the stakeholders yearn for, because our own is to ensure the exploitation, maximize the exploitation of oil and gas industry. So whatever would help us achieve that, transparency will help us achieve that, peace and harmony in the host community will help us achieve that. We're going to do all it takes to accomplish that, to make that happen. That will be my concluding comments. We can have an offline discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, FIRS.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. Let me say about one thing, that is, there's no way in the world that a law can solve all the problems. And a law cannot be perfect. And that's why there's room for amendments. But for the PIA, by the time we start the implementation, we'll definitely see areas to be amended, areas to be developed, and things to remove and to add. So let us take this as we have gotten it now to even start the journey. As the moderator said, it's a beginning of a journey and it's not a destination. So having said that, I believe that if we do our own bit as operators, as stakeholders, we still achieve what it is expected to achieve. As regarding the revenue mobilization representative said, that why should government come at this time with a law that will reduce the revenue that's going to the federation by 20%? You should know that if there are no production at all, nothing will even go to the federation. So we need to first of all encourage, when people are encouraged to put money to invest, there will be revenue. And don't forget that it's only PPT, where there are production, where there are also, what do you call them, services companies are having contract to do. There will be employment of people. There will be other things that will boost the economy. Then revenue will start coming. It's not only the one that goes to federation that make the economy. There are others that does not go to federation that make the economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much once again. I think just few concluding remarks. One, the key takeaway from this session is really there's a lot of engagement that needs to happen across the value chain. There are quite a number of misinformation in the industry. There's quite a misinformation also to the larger stakeholders. And we really want to thank Neiti for creating this platform. From the room here, you can see really a lot of clarifications that needs to go in. Some improvements, of course, some feedbacks are coming. So we'll take it back. I think from perspective of quite improved engagement will help. Specific to some of the clarifications regarding the security, yes, the KPMG talked about the oil theft. Until we deal with the big issues, yes. However, we really need to appreciate, understand what it takes to change. It's not a one jump and you crash. It's a continuous thing. You slice change and you get the results. So PIA, a piece of legislation, has addressed the host community, which is one, the license to operate until the community is happy with you before you can even get some intelligence. The industry in itself, from the competitiveness point of view, if somebody comes to invest, will definitely invest in IT adoptions, collaboration with the government security agencies, and some other interventions that can really help you to. But one more thing is the honesty of all of us. The host communities must be honest. The government security agencies, everybody must be honest and be patriotic to the country. It is only when we do that, and there's no piece of legislation that addresses the human tendencies. It takes courage of leadership and consequence management to get it. So all of us are involved. No one can solve it alone. It takes every one of us to get it. From our side as NMPC, PIA really has given NMPC a big impetus to contribute to the larger economy of Nigeria. We're already beginning to see a massive change in the NMPC, has transformed to NMPC Limited, has done a massive acquisition of a downstream entity. Today, NMPC is the largest downstream company within just few months. NMPC was envisaged to be migrating from an oil company to an energy company. And we're very proud to say today NMPC are actually, in actual sense, actually already an energy company. We have investment in power. We have investment in the gas itself in terms of the upstream and the midstream. We're already investing in auto gas. That takes us to the downstream. We're investing in oil. We're also into non-oil. So give NMPC all the support, be it your company of choice. At the end of the day, the value comes back to you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. My quick intervention, my quick response will be on three issues. One is to remind us that COP27 dwelled so much on energy equity between developing countries and advanced countries. And if you come to developing countries, Nigeria is a frontline state. And the leverage they are giving us is not endless. Because even if through policy they say, yes, we can give you some credit for over a period of time. Technology is not waiting. Tesla is on. Electric cars are coming. So at the end of the day, if we don't take advantage of the period we have now, technology will catch up with us. And very soon, electric cars will take over and we will stay with our supplies. So we really need to make hay while the sun shines. That is one. The other one is, I want to respond to our friend from KPMG about the issue of theft. The issue of theft is not a regulatory problem. It is not even an institutional governance problem. It is a political governance problem. And the happy thing about it is that our candidates are all making references to that issue. That issue has to be solved at the highest echelon of political governance. If you think it is something that will be solved at the level of an NPC, it will not be solved because it's not a regulatory issue. So, and the happy thing is that it is occupying the attention as the electioneering is going on. And my last intervention will be on our sister who talked about cross-border. The cross-border issue is a creation of our subsidy regime. That's what is created. And the only way we can solve it is also to solve the problem of subsidy. It is when you have appropriate pricing within Nigeria that people will know that you cannot take an oil you acquired through appropriate pricing here to another market that the price will even be higher. That's the only way you can solve it. That will not need kinetic processes. It will just need the appropriate policies to make sure that petroleum products are appropriately priced in Nigeria, and it will end the cross-border trade. Thank you very much.
That's right. Thank you very much, panelists. We would like to appreciate. Would like to appreciate the panelists and also the audience for their various contributions. As I said, it's not possible to, at a single event of this nature, exhaust all the critical issues, because the more ideas come up, the more you find that there are questions to be raised and questions to be answered. So the organizers have their hands full. They have other opportunities to deal with this. On this note, let us appreciate those who've been on the panel. Dr. Friday Ohuche, consultant. Dr. Ohuche, thank you very much for being around. We also would like to thank Dr. Mrs. Zainab Gobri of the authority. She stepped out a moment ago. Lawan Musa, GGM of NNPC Limited. Thank you for being here. Gabriel Ogunjole Milusi of FRS. Thank you very much for being here. We also appreciate Engineer Janice Ayaun of the Commission for your contributions to today's discussion. And last but not the least, from KESA, human rights lawyer, and Frank Tietie. Frank, thank you very much for being here. So, once again, we appreciate you. And the next thing will be to invite the Executive Secretary of Neiti. I would suggest, therefore, that you kindly step down and back to your respective seats. Thank you. Just mind your steps. Mind your steps. As I said, the risers and steps are not very friendly. Yes. So I now invite the Executive Secretary of Neiti to tell us about the next steps.
Well, thank you very much. And I would like to thank all the panelists and all our participants for their patience and for the informed, very informed engagements with issues at stake. I also like to thank those who were discussing while the discussions were going on. It was also part of the participation. But I think when we step out from our homes to a conference like this, it will be helpful to listen and pick out one thing. If you would like to talk, the doors are open. You can go outside and talk and laugh as much as you want. So having said that, at the Presidential Steering Committee of the PIA, which I'm honored to be serving as a representative of Neiti, what we resolved was for all the 9 agencies that are serving on STECO to organize not just once, as much as possible, series of engagements with stakeholders as it affects their specific mandate. There are 9 of us in that steering committee. The first is the NNPC. They were here and they have organized a lot. I've attended some. The second agency is the NUPRC. They have also organized a lot as it affects their mandate. You have the commission. They were also here. They have also organized the regulatory commission at the midstream, downstream level. You have the FRS, attended the one they did in Lagos. And we have the PDTF, which is the secretariat. We are 9 members of the steering committee. Each and every one of us were expected. Neiti's own concerns the multi-stakeholders. And this, what we have done today, is just one in the series of engagements we plan to hold. We want to hold one specifically for the civil society, and we're planning one specifically for the media. And we equally would like to do one specifically for the companies under the Neiti Companies Forum that we are planning to hold in Lagos. Therefore, very grateful to once more to whoever gives you money at this time in Nigeria, keep thanking the person, whether at family level or as an institution. Oxford management, Oxford policy management are the most important guests in this room as far as I'm concerned. Thank you very much. The next step we want to do is we have listened, we have rapporteurs that are taking all the comments. We have listened very carefully. We have also exposed to you what we are doing. We have equally created opportunity for other sister agencies involved in the PIA to provide insights and update on what they are doing. All these are harvesting of ideas, which we are putting back into the table to go back and work and rejig and go back to the PIA and see how we can reflect this. We do not want what has happened to our oil and gas industry since 1957 to happen again with this new law. We want to see a new industry that can produce money, revenues, attract investment, and allow those investments to be maximally deployed to national development to reduce poverty and aggression in our country. That's all this about. So we'll be working with stakeholder members to implement the ideas we have kindly shared. The other one is to what aspect of the ideas you have shared can help us shape the ongoing review of Neiti Act. The Neiti Act was done in 2007. Between 2007 and now, it's a lot of gap. And we need a law to make sure we are empowered and strengthened as Neiti to carry out these and more of your suggestions, which will soon be at the National Assembly after the first reading once there is public hearing. And what we have also achieved today is that we have your addresses. And if you need our oil and gas industry to change, you have to help us be at the National Assembly to raise your voices during the public hearing, to lend your voices that Neiti should be strengthened to do much more. We are the only agency that are shouting transparency, accountability. And let me just share one example. FRS, please forgive me, NNPC, close your ears. If our report leads to recovery of revenue, as it has done in the past. We don't take any credit, we don't take any money. The agencies that collect taxes, they pick up all the taxes, and they are entitled to 4% of what the collection. The agencies that collect royalty, they collect all the royalty quietly, and are entitled to at least their own receiving about 6 or 7%. And you can imagine 6% of $30 million. Neiti, that worked with all these agencies, we go home empty-handed. I've never seen such arrangement before. So what we are doing now is working with the agencies to have a kind of synergy that allows both the up and down to exist and work hand in hand. And the agencies in the stakeholder are doing exactly just that. The final one is that this engagement is continuous. I have already cascaded it. We also have one where we're going to organize specifically for the MDAs. Well, we do hope that our supporters, our partners in the development community, the Ford Foundation, the EU, the World Bank, and the we in Neiti, we also have our budgetary provisions, but it can always not be enough, but we are not complaining. We are doing very well, however, but we need help where necessary. Because this information is key. Look at the kind of quality interaction that has come out of this. We thought we were doing well until we have listened to you. By the time we go back to analyze all the issues that came up here, our thinking will be different. So our next steps are very clear and specific, and you have helped us to set that the new agenda. And therefore, the whole excess of coming here have been fully achieved. We are grateful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Executive Secretary of Neiti, Dr. Oji Ogbonaya Oji, for thanking participants and resource persons at this very useful stakeholders engagement forum. Yes, you advise those who want to have a conversation on what to do a moment ago. Can we also advise you to follow your footsteps? And then, thank you very much. But for the final round of appreciation, let me invite a member of the National Stakeholders Working Group, which is the board of Neiti. He represents the Northwest Zone on the board, Dr. Bashir Gafai, to give the vote of thanks.
I thank you for giving me the chance to deliver vote of thanks. Permit me, please, to stand on the existing protocol. On behalf of the Neiti NSWG members, we thank all the participants here present, representatives of government agencies, private companies, CSOs, professional bodies, panelists, partners, gentlemen and women of the press, and other members. Indeed, this is a wonderful and remarkable event, which I believe it added knowledge and value to the Neiti stakeholders, and hope to be maintained as at when due. As it brings together the experts of the oil and gas industry that highlighted the effect of the PIA to the national economy. I hope that the same engagement forum would be organized and conducted on solid mineral resources, please. We also thank Neiti Secretariat and management staff for their tireless support and cooperation to ensure that this event has taken place successfully at the right time. Thank you all, and God bless you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gafai, for the appreciation. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, to close, let's rise for the national anthem. And just a reminder again, please, when the national anthem is being played, no movement, cameraman or not. The national anthem. God bless the Federal Republic of Nigeria.